Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I request all of you to please be seated. We're about to begin. I can see a lot of vacant chairs in the front as well, so please occupy it and kindly settle down and be seated. You can bring your coffee or tea to the table. So may I request all of you who are standing at the back to please come and grab your chairs. I once again request everybody to quickly settle down, please. We are starting in next 2 minutes. Check. 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 Good morning to all and sundry. May I have your attention, please? Finally, I see the light of the day. And it feels heavenly and delectable to see happy and congenial faces around me. What a sparkling sight it is from here. Well, they say that great things happen when there's a gathering of great minds, and we have ensured just that. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Kamal Homi Mistry, And I would like to extend a very hearty welcome to each one of you, big and warm enough to encompass all of you to this amazing place. And as we all know that we have gathered here for a very special occasion. So once again, a very warm welcome to India Business and Trade Conclave 2023. India Business and Trade, that is IBT, is a distinctive knowledge platform set up by the Trade Promotion Council of India, TPCI, to serve the interest of the Indian enterprise in a dynamic global market. TPCI is an apex trade and investment promotion organization notified in the Foreign Trade Policy. TPCI is also recognized and supported by the Department of Commerce, Government of India. The Council worked towards facilitating the growth of Indian industry with global investment and trade opportunities. It provides strategies for expanding business internationally by organizing specialized business events and simultaneously working with the government by providing policy suggestions which are essentially based on inputs collated from research and industry stakeholders. The Council also works towards facilitating inward investment for India in potential sectors via collaborations and JV opportunities. IBT has been launched in synergy with TPCI's core objective of facilitating the growth of Indian industry with global investment and trade opportunities. Within a short span of around 3 years, IBT has positioned itself as a hub for invaluable information and insights on trade opportunities, policy initiatives, global challenges, and growth strategies for the benefit of the Indian business community. Building further on the vision of this exemplary platform, today's India Business and Trade Conclave is a pioneering initiative by TPCI to encourage enriching and outcome-oriented discussions between policy and industry on taking India to the forefront of global trade. This gala inaugural India Business and Trade Conclave, based on the theme India at 2030, decoding FTP 23 and blueprint for a $2 trillion export economy, focuses specifically on the recently announced FTP 2023, which represents a major paradigm shift in India's trade policy. The conclave aims to facilitate better understanding of FTP 2023 among industry and at the same time providing them a platform to express their queries, issues, and challenges. With this objective, we are honored and grateful to our esteemed chief guest, none other than Director General Foreign Trade, Sri Santosh Sarangi himself, for having taken out time from his busy schedule to grace this event, to share his erudite insights on FTP 2023 and interact with stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give a huge round of applause for him, please? We are also honored to welcome our guests of honor for today, Mohammad Noor Rahman Sheikh, IFS Joint Secretary, Economic Diplomacy Division, Ministry of External Affairs, and Mr. Sanjeet Singh, IRS, Senior Advisor, NITI Ayog. We would also like to welcome Mr. Mohit Singla, Chairman, Trade Promotion Council of India, who needs no introduction. Now, we would like to start with the lighting of lamp ceremony. In India, we practice lighting of lamp before any auspicious occasion in order to get rid away from the darkness, to get the blessings from gods and goddesses, especially Bhagwan Ganesha. So let's begin. May I request our chief guest to begin with to please come on this stage. I request Mr. Santosh Kumar Sarangi ji to please come on the stage, along with Mr. Mohit Singla, also our guest of honor, Mohammad Noor Rahman ji. And can we have all the panelists who are going to be a part of the panel discussions as well to please come on the stage. May the truth prevails and the darkness be swept away by the dawn of self-realization. This is an undying tradition in India to invoke the blessings of God and goddesses. Let's give a big hand. So we have given religious opening to this wonderful ceremony. Thank you, all of you. Thank you so much. Please take your seats. We would also like to acknowledge and thank our sponsors for their innumerable support. Please, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big hand for Godrej Consumer Products Limited, Sri Lal Mahal Group, Everest Food Products Private Limited, GD Foods Manufacturing India Private Limited, Motherson Air Travel Agencies Limited, and our knowledge partner, EY. Now to set the context for the conclave, I will now like to invite on stage Mr. Girdhari Lal, Director EY, to give a brief presentation on decoding FTP 2023. Let's give a big hand for him, ladies and gentlemen.
A very good morning to all distinguished guests, participants, representatives from industry and business, and I in particular thanks the TPCI for giving us this opportunity, the forum, to share our thoughts and highlights on FTP 2023. So, at the outset, I must congratulate the government for drafting meticulously and taking out a lot of time in terms of doing a consultation, making the entire process very engaging, thought-provoking, and having all the inputs embedded into the trade policy, which will help India surge further. So let me start with the key highlights of the trade policy. If you look at the key pillars there, India has been a signatory and a key participant at a global level. So we are adhering to all the global norms, and in trying to do so, we have taken a lot of steps. One key shift is from the incentives to the tax remission model that we have in India currently. India has been innovating and investing heavily in automation, innovation, and process re-engineering to enable ease of doing business for exports. which in common parlance we call ease of exports. I'll be deliberating more onto it, and throughout this session that is planned for the day, you will have a lot of insights and inputs coming your way. Again, the key focus of trade policy has been collaborative approach, and taking the Honorable Prime Minister vision of decentralizing and taking exports to the masses, you will see that there is a lot of stress given onto the states and district participation. Now moving on, of course, if you have to make the entire construct a success, you'll have to be joining the bandwagon and ensure that you are adhering to the norms, investing heavily into the newness, novelty, like you may need to innovate and invest heavily. If you are already there, you need to form it up, take it to the next level. And some of the concepts like which I would want to touch upon is e-commerce for exports. There is a lot of talk about developing exports hub, particularly at a district, at a local level. Of course, a lot of streamlining policy imperatives are there. SCOMET is one such policy imperative. Before I move forward, just a key call out that media has been taking this entire message, because the outreach has to happen and the masses are to be not only educated, because they are the one who are the brand mascots and the real champions of the surge, the growth that we have in trade. So you will see that right from the coverage, the adequate focus is there on the trade, and some of the excerpts from the media and the social media is out there on the screen. I think there's some slides are stuck, but let me try. Okay, thank you. Now, if you look at when we are trying to develop the construct, India has to have a healthy participation from all these sectors. So let me quickly call it out. If you look at the policy, it is not restrictive, but it is all inclusive. It is trying to encourage all the promising sectors. Some of the prominent sectors that are listed there are telecom, electronic, you talk about chemicals, you talk about food processing. Enough incentivization, enough is being done. A lot of initiatives, a lot of hand-holding, capacity building, and other schemes are there to facilitate these sectors to grow. And India, while doing so, is mindful of the mega trends that are there to enable the entire ecosystem. A quick call out on some of the mega trends that are already there is you will have a lot of focus and discussion around FTAs. India has been shifting, rightly so, onto the services side. The recent agreements that we have with Mauritius, Australia, UAE is an attestation of the commitment that the Indian government is rightly doing onto these accounts. If you look at, are we doing enough, or have we made a good start? I'll say certainly yes. The various initiatives of the government is making the growth path ease out in terms of making the entire process more participative. So we are aware that compliances regimes have to be eased out. A lot of simplification and systems are to be there, which are to be integrated, so that both the information as well as transactional systems that we have for the trade is working out to the best of the user experience or the exporter's experience. Trade facilitation, of course, is a cornerstone of the entire ecosystem development, and the Indian government, I'll take you through some survey numbers which is there on the subsequent slide to highlight that there has been good steps that has already been taken. And India is of course mindful that any growth is not a good growth unless and until you have sustainability and a circular economy, these kind of norms embedded into your growth story. Now, going on, if you look at the key pillars, starting with the incentives to remissions. So India, of course, has been committed at a global level that yes, we will be doing as per the global norms, but also mindful of the local requirements here. So there are two key schemes that I want to highlight, RoadTap and EPCG scheme. In the RoadTap scheme, you will see that there's a lot of rebate, and this rebate that we talk about there is a percentage that has been fixed on FOB value, and there is also a ceiling limit that is provided, that is value cap per unit. So while the details are there in the public domain, a quick call out on the fact that there is a scheme while it is being implemented, the focus is on e-script. That is end-to-end, the digitization of issuance of rebate amount is done in form of e-script, which is of course being supported by CBIC. Moving on, if you look at the other side, there are EPCG schemes. Of course, it has been there. It has been reloaded or revalidated in terms of making it more conducive for the ecosystem. So if you look at even the PM Mitra, there has been an adequate stress on it. There is more that has been emphasized in terms of making the entire scheme more encompassing and enriching. Quick call out on the dairy sector. There has been necessary exemptions provided there. Even if you look at the battery electric vehicles, there is now, these exporters are now given the desired benefits. So they can draw the benefits out of APCG. A quick call out, of course, the cornerstone of the governance of the current incumbent government is that Vivad se Vishwas. And the amnesty scheme that is there is an attestation to the very fact that it is a one-time opportunity, that if there is an obligation, if there is something that you have run out of, and you want to amicably resolve the dispute, do you have a forum? Do you have an opportunity? The answer is yes. So I'll urge all the industry and the businesses to take opportunity of this very moment and ensure that if you can take benefit of the amnesty scheme, please do avail the benefits. Just a quick call out, of course, if there is a fraud or a divergence, these things are kept outside the ambit of this scheme. Now, something which is there, which is a key buzzword, we keep talking about e-commerce for exports. But why are we stressing on this very fact is, we know that there is a common saying, network to net worth. The same is also true for the trade ecosystem. If you look at the global footprint, you can outreach to a market size of 2.14 billion, roughly around that figure. And this size is growing year on year. It's almost 20% growth that we are envisaging. As a country, what we are looking at is, this sector has a potential to provide us another $350 billion. That's a huge amount. So how do we do it? Of course, there are key focus call-outs in the policy, but if you look at, it is essentially, if I were to bucket it into two categories, one is, of course, having a system which is there. These systems which are there has to be both ways working out. That once an exporter is there, how quickly, how smoothly you onboard them to a platform. It could be a collaborative approach through various players that are already investing or are planning to invest. You can have a collaborative approach to have such platforms in public domain, of course, with the supporting of the government. Now, once these domains are there, wherein everything, onboarding to throughput, that is the order fulfillment is happening, everything is there, you also need a conducive policy. And these commitments are already there, that you would be looking at strengthening of the existing infrastructure spaces, to name a few, like the warehousing has to be notified. There are a lot of e-commerce hubs, which is called out specifically in the FTP. So in the coming days, we are looking at a lot of these enablement further to form up the e-commerce space that is there for exports. Moving on, want to really quickly touch upon that in terms of the sustainability and digitization survey that is being carried out. There are UNSCAP. If you look at their survey score, you would be very happily, I'm rather very happily informing you that we have surged from a survey score of 78% to over 90%. And full credit to the committee, NCTF, which has been formulated, which has been taking the task. But a good start, definitely. Can we do more in terms of trade facilitation? Certainly, yes. So essentially, if you look at the bottom, we are talking about market intelligence, having right information which is loaded onto the exporters, to the rightful stakeholders there, ensuring that the compliance regime is eased out. We need to do capacity building in such a way that individual level handholding could be provisioned. I'm also mindful of the fact that probably a lot of deliberations would be there. So I'm just quickly running past some of my slides. Uh, Moving on, this is again ease of doing business. I'll not delve into the details of the various, it's just to give you a quick impression that government has so many system, wonderful utilities that are there in the public domain. To call a few, Niryat Bandhu, you have online customer portal, you have issuance of e-certificate. What we are trying to highlight is the government has been transforming through series of reforms, which has helped cut down on the timeline of delivery. Something which was being done earlier for days or months, now you can see it has become faceless. That is, you can apply everything online and then probably, I'll take another 1 or 2 minutes more. So moving on now, what is it that we need to really ensure? I think transparency, enabling the stakeholders with right information set. So we need to integrate. As of now, what we see a visible gap is you have multiple forums. If you can combine them into an integrated forum wherein I get to know the entitlement, I need not hop from one system to the other system to know what are the processes around a particular scheme, a particular thing that I want to apply for. So these things are already being deliberated at the highest level, and in times to come, we'll see our systems improving big time. Now, moving on, something which I want to really touch upon, and this is go to the heart of our Honorable Prime Minister, that is that he focuses and talks a lot about empowering the grassroots level. And these two particular schemes that are there on the screen, towns of export excellence, of course the norms have been lowered, and especially for a particular sector. So there is that empower them right at the grassroots level so that people feel empowered. They participate into the global journey. And the same is true for district as export hub. There are specific numbers, there are specific call-outs there. But what essentially is there, the government is not only doing a paper reform, they are actually investing in decentralizing and making the entire process participative. So with this, I end my short presentation. And I really, again, thank you and invite you all to the day's deliberations and sessions ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for setting the tone for the day ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have someone who needs no introduction. Please put your hands together and welcome Man for All the Seasons Chairman TPCI, Mr. Mohit Singla.
Good morning to all. Greetings to our esteemed panelists, eminent dignitaries and delegates from the Indian industry, diplomatic fora, investment promotion bodies, consultants, and all the industry members. I thank you all for joining us in this inaugural edition of India Business and Trade Conclave 2023. The conclave has been timed along with the release of the Foreign Trade Policy 2023 and is also subsiding with the vision of our Honorable Commerce and Industries Minister to achieve a $2 trillion export economy. India Business and Trade Conclave in its inaugural edition will talk about the release of the policy and trade deliberations. And the years to come, it will be the forefront to discuss all the aspects of global trade, India's foreign trade, and the factors around it. We are establishing the platform in such a manner that we can discuss openly and in an open format about all the trade related aspects, including trade disputes, trade promotion, trade negotiations, and multilateral approach to achieve a rule-based order. The conclave will also emphasize on how the industry will benefit from the initiatives of the government, focusing on emerging areas of growth and potential. On behalf of TPCI, I welcome Mr. Santosh Kumar Sarangi, Director General of Foreign Trade, under whose leadership the dynamic foreign trade policy was launched this year. This is the most awaited tactical document that the government has released this year, and the industry has been eagerly waiting for this document because it decides the way the country will progress further in the years to come in the foreign trade realm. The release of FTP has created a sense of enthusiasm and optimism amongst all the stakeholders. And the timely release, coupled with the views of CIM to set up a $2 trillion export economy, we are going to receive a very, very informative presentation and views and the thought behind this large target from Mr. Sarangi himself on how to decode this large target. Everybody has been thinking about whether this target is really possible, but we are lucky that we will have views of Mr. Sarangi himself on how we are going to achieve this. Policies can facilitate industry and business. However, collaboration between all stakeholders is important to fulfill the vision of the government. It is encouraging that exports in past 3 years is on a very, very high growth trajectory. We have seen a CAGR of up to 12.5%, which is a very, very powerful achievement. And today, this year, 2023, we have achieved an export target of $450 billion approximately. We are sure that with the release of this FTP document, the export is only on an upward trajectory. We are also privileged to have with us members from Ministry of External Affairs, Mr. Noor Mohammed. Welcome, sir. We will have, Mr. Mohammed will deliberate on the prospects of global trade from a geopolitical perspective. We are also pleased to have with us Mr. Sanjeet Singh, who is the lead on commerce and trade at Niti Aayog, who is creating the overall arching policies for the creating of better export potentials for India. I would also like to welcome representatives of the diplomatic fora. We have members, members of trade from Korea, from Taiwan, from the Russian Federation, from Australia, from the United States, and Chile. Pardon me if I'm missing someone, that's the last count that I had. On behalf of TPCI, I once again thank you all for sparing this valuable time and being a part of us for this inaugural edition of India Business and Trade Conclave, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for setting the ball rolling. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome on stage once again Mr. Santosh Kumar Sarangi, our chief guest for today. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give a thunderous round of applause? Come on. I request you, sir, to please share a few words with all of us.
Good morning, everyone. Chairman TPCI Mohit, my colleague in MEA Noor, representatives from various embassies, friends from the trade and friends from the media. At the outset, let me compliment TPCI for launching the inaugural edition of India Business and Trade, which is a very timely event. And hopefully, this grows into a platform for free and frank exchange among government functionaries as well as trade on the roadmap for increasing India's global footprint. Today, I'm here to talk about FTP. When we work in bureaucracy, there are times when we find it difficult to convince our political masters on certain issues. So that time, the immediate instinct is to hire one of the big fours and allow them to make a good presentation before the political masters with good reason and rhyme so that the proposal gets approved. Today, I had the privilege of one of the big fours making this presentation on decoding FTP. And for this, I didn't have to hire E&Y. So that's a big saving on my pocket, but thanks E&Y for the presentation that you made on decoding FTP. After they have done, I don't have to speak much on FTP, so I would rather spend a little time on how India is envisaging to reach 1 trillion of merchandise exports till 2030. All of you are familiar, both our Prime Minister as well as our Commerce Minister have been talking of 2 trillion exports by 2030. So 1 trillion in services, 1 trillion in goods. And I'll be spending a little time on the mechanism through which we intend to aspire or achieve this ambitious target. As all of you are aware, FTP is only an instrument to facilitate trade and also to lay down the roadmap. And to that extent, the 4 pillars that E&Y talked of in the previous presentation, where we are moving away from an incentive-based regime to a remission-based regime. We are moving towards a more digital enablement which will facilitate trade, and to that extent our future aspiration is that none of you should actually be required to visit a DGFT office or a RA office except when you want to have a cup of tea. For your works, you should not be required to visit a DGFT office. To that extent, e-enablement. And thirdly, collaboration with states, district governments, our Indian missions abroad, our various Government of India departments. So to what extent we can collaborate to achieve further trade. And lastly, focusing on emerging areas where focusing on high technology products, SCOMET items, ensuring that our export regime is streamlined and aligned with some of the international agreements like Wassenaar Agreement, Australia Group, so that high technology products are able to get an export market. Secondly, focusing on e-commerce, which has a huge potential in future. And thirdly, on focusing on districts and export clusters to facilitate exports. These are the 4 broad areas on which the FTP 2023 has been launched, and we will be focusing on all of this. And in my presentation, I'll also be speaking a bit about all of these areas. Can we have the presentation, please? So I'll be talking of this in my presentation. This is going to be the flow. As far as the importance of export is concerned, I know I am talking to a very enlightened audience. I don't have to speak much. But this study by Foucault and Huguin, who did a time series study from 45 till 2014, clearly establishes that the higher exports of countries has a positive correlationship with higher growth in per capita income. So if you look at some of the export intensive economies like China, South Korea, France, and Austria and many other countries which are export intensive, you will see this correlationship where their per capita income has grown in proportion to their growth in exports. When it comes to agenda setting for 1 trillion exports, it's quite clear that we will have to focus on the demand side and the supply side. On the demand side, we will have to find out novel mechanisms of accessing international market, and for that, some of the instruments that we have been using is signing more and more FTAs, especially with complementary countries, signing more investment agreements, attracting MNCs and an effort to integrate with the global value chain, and to focus on market promotion and branding of Indian products. On the supply side, we are streamlining our export policy, moving into schemes like RODTEP, drawback in a big way, ensuring manufacturing competitiveness through schemes like PLI, production linked incentive schemes, ensuring we have logistic effectiveness. Many of you have heard that some of the developed economies, the logistic as a cost of, as a percentage of FOB value is only about 8 to 9%, whereas in India it is estimated to be in the range of 12 to 14%. So if we improve our logistic efficiency, our exporters can have a saving of 5 to 6% in their FOB value, and to that extent it will make them more competitive in the international market. Trade facilitation is an ongoing effort. In the previous presentation, they talked of National Trade Facilitation Committee and customs as well as DGFT. It has been our continuous endeavor to ensure that trade facilitation regime is eased and is bettered for the ease of doing business. Labor reforms is another area on which the government has been actively working, and recently you saw some of the reforms in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka where flexibility of work hours for women workers was also allowed. I'll be talking briefly about the current conditions, risks and opportunities. All of you are familiar with India's macroeconomic picture. India has been a relatively sweet spot where we have grown at 9.1% in 21-22, about 7% last year, and we are estimated to grow at 6.5% in the current year. And this makes us one of the fastest growing economies among the comparable economies. We are now the 5th largest economy. However, one must keep in the background that both IMF and WTO have projected a relatively cautious signal as far as the global GDP growth is concerned and global trade growth is concerned. As per WTO's estimate, the global trade growth is likely to slow down to about 1.7% in 2023. Our export performance has been phenomenal, especially in the last 2 years. If you look at this slide, it would tell you that last year we reached the highest ever export of 676 billion, that is in 21-22, and in 22-23 we exceeded that by another 100 billion and reached 776 billion, with merchandise trade of about 450 billion and services trade of about 326 billion. To reach our aspiration of 2 trillion, this is the growth path that we'll have to adapt, and to that extent this looks quite ambitious, but I believe not impossible given the kind of growth rates that we have seen in the past. The CAGR required for achieving this is about 14.5%, and as you would see that from the period of 9 to 16 we grew at about 6.1%, and from 16 to 22 at about 9.3%, but from here on we'll have to grow at 14.5%, which is quite a steep curve, a rather challenging scenario, but if we have to achieve this 2 trillion aspiration, this is the curve that we'll have to undertake and climb. There are many scenarios which could derail this aspiration. All of us are aware of the implications of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So any geopolitical tension from here on could create a lot of supply chain disruptions. There are tensions in Taiwan and China, so what kind of impact it will have on geopolitical scenario, one is not very sure. If there are implications of a financial contagion, to what extent it will affect global economy is something that one is wary of. And the relationship between China, EU and US is something that will have to be closely watched. And to what extent high inflation rate in some of the economies. We have seen what is happening in Argentina and some of the other Latin American countries because of high inflation rates. So to what extent will it impact the global trade scenario is something that we'll have to watch. There are many ways in which we are facilitating export today: FTAs, duty remission schemes, a lot of market access initiatives where we allow our exporters to go and participate in overseas fairs and trade shows. We have an interest equalization scheme where small exporters are, MSME exporters are supported. There are a lot of ease of doing business initiatives and district export hub initiative. all of these are the present mechanism. There are also many mechanisms for supporting manufacturing. The PLI has been talked of, FAME, PM Matsya Sampada Yojana, which is to encourage fisheries production, PM formulation of micro food processing units, Make in India, Startup, Skill India are various initiatives which are supposed to support a manufacturing ecosystem. If we look at our export market, you'll see that the top 20 markets, there are about 8 markets with which we run a trade surplus and about 12 markets with which we run a trade deficit. And coincidentally or as a result of our lack of ability to leverage some of the FTA negotiation, you would see that barring China and Saudi Arab, with all the rest of the countries which are in red, we have an FTA. So the extent to which our partners have taken an advantage in FTA is relatively better than our ability to take advantage in an FTA, and that is quite clear from this slide. So to this extent, increasing our manufacturing competitiveness and take advantage of our FTA negotiation is something that India will have to work on very closely. But there is another thing which also needs to be seen in this particular slide. Barring Nepal and Bangladesh, where our exports as a share of their import is fairly high, in rest of the economies, our export as a share of their total import is very low. If you look at the US, our share is only 2.6%. If you look at China, the share of our export as part of their import is very, very low. So this gives us sufficient leg space or room to deepen our exports in these markets. The 21st economy, this is for the top 20, 21st economy is Japan, which again is the 4th largest importer in the world. So there is enough scope for increasing and deepening our export in these top 20, 21 markets. Some of the export products, one will have to look at the profile of Indian exports. If you look at the category 1 here, the world is trading 71% in category 1 kind of products. And what are these category 1 products? These are chapter 84, 85, 87. These are all electronic products, all electrical products, motors, pumps, and electrical controls, electrical conductors, a lot of these mobile telephones. And India's share in the world import is only 0.3%. And this is where we have to improve substantially if we want to reach that 1 trillion export in merchandise goods. And if you look at category 4, the world is trading only 3% in these kind of commodities, but our share in the world import is about 20%. So that's a relatively inelastic market, and that is why we are trading the largest. So we need to change the profile of our export products if we want to achieve that 1 trillion ambition. If you look at some of our peer countries, then you will see that there are countries which adopt different paths for improving the merchandise export as a percentage of their GDP. And this, as I have pointed out in the past, that increase in merchandise export as a percent of GDP has a very positive correlation with increase in per capita income. So if you look at Germany, 40% is their merchandise export as a share of their GDP. If you look at Vietnam, 91%. The paths adopted by them is very different. If you look at Germany, a strong R&D ecosystem, strong precision technology-based engineering, and a strong focus on capital goods and auto components has actually led to this export growth. If you look at Vietnam, it is their integration with global value chain which has resulted in this kind of growth in their exports. So countries can adopt different paths for increasing their exports, but the bottom line is increase in exports is a requirement if you are looking at a higher per capita income in your economy. What are India's option? If you look at China, what is it exporting the most on? You look at chapter 87, chapter 27, 84, 85, 72, 73, 30, 39. So these are products, pharmaceutical products, electrical, electronics, auto components, articles of iron and steel. These are the chapters in which China is exporting the most. If you look at these products, these are somewhere at the bottom in our export profile. So we need to increase our exports in these kind of chapters, and to that extent, our pharmaceutical, our electronics, our engineering goods will have to do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to this 1 trillion export ambition. We were doing a preliminary analysis of what could be the requirement for different sectors to reach 1 trillion. So this is a preliminary analysis only, it is not final, but we will do a lot of stakeholder consultation with the groups to see how this export ambition could be fulfilled and what are the building blocks for this. So these are some of the sectors that we will have to focus on. As I pointed out, engineering goods, chemicals and pharma, electronics, textiles, agriculture and marine. These sectors will have to do a lot of heavy lifting if it comes to achieving this 1 trillion export ambition. If we want to achieve this in engineering goods, they will have to grow at 15.9% CAGR. These are some of the groups. Engineering group is quite big. We have 34 panels in engineering EPC. So we were distributing in terms of base metals, machineries and instruments, and auto and other vehicle components. And this is the kind of growth which is required in each of the segment. If we look at pharma, this will have to grow at 12.2% to achieve this 57 billion of export target. Again, breaking it down into different categories of pharmaceutical product, what is the export required is something that we have worked on. We are working on in consultation with the trade. Electronics, there are a lot of schemes which support electronics manufacturing and focus on mobile phone manufacturing, semiconductor chips design, assembly manufacturing is something that will be focused on. This is one bright segment in India's export because a lot of global players, including Apple and Samsung, have set up base here. And we have seen that mobile phone exports on a monthly basis has reached 1 billion plus in the last 6 to 7 months. And the way their expansion plan is proposed, we expect this to do a lot of heavy lifting as far as export growth is concerned. So to reach 100 billion, they will have to grow at 23% CAGR. But electronic segment is very confident that this is doable and possible if the way our PLIs have been designed, the way our ecosystem is being supported, this should be fairly feasible. Agri and marine is very essential to support our farmers, and to that extent, focusing on higher value addition, food processing, ensuring that in marine products, broodstock availability is eased, ensuring that good aquaculture practices followed to penetrate some of the developed markets is something that is essential. And this will be the growth rate that will be required in each of the sector. Marine will require about 12% CAGR to reach 18 billion exports by 2030. Similarly, in textile, the ready-made garments, the MMF, they will have to do a lot of this export performance to reach about 100 billion exports by 2030. Some of the issues, emerging areas on which we will focus on is of course e-commerce. All of you are familiar that e-commerce growth has been tremendous in the last couple of years, and the future prospect is huge. It is estimated that by 2025, the global e-commerce export will reach about $2 trillion. That is the cross-border e-commerce. domestic e-commerce is likely to become more than 40% of the traded goods, and cross-border e-commerce is going to grow at a very rapid pace. If you look at India's trade ecosystem, most of our trading regulations were designed for a B2B interface, from a business to business interface. But e-commerce breaks that barrier and looks at a scenario where B2C interface is higher, and to that extent, a lot of changes in policy tweaking is required, and we are working with customs, we are working with RBI, we are working with Department of Post, and we are working with a whole range of stakeholders, including courier services, e-commerce players like Amazon, Flipkart, eBay, to ensure that the e-commerce ecosystem is strengthened and our regulations are able to address some of the requirements of a B2C export scenario. The collaboration with states and districts is something that I have spoken of, and my previous presenter has also spoken of. We are now making an effort to ensure that more and more districts are able to join the export bandwagon. If you look at the profile of our exports, only 70 districts account for 80% of our exports. We have some 600, how many, Sanjit bhai, kitna district hai total? 750. So the total number of district is always a bit of a confusion. So, but we have, on last count, I was told that we have some 764 districts after Andhra bifurcated a few more districts. But for the sake of convenience, let's assume 750. So out of 750 districts, only 70 districts account for more than 80% of export. And to that extent, this should show you the potential of our export if all the districts are made aware and are given the ecosystem to join the export bandwagon. So to that extent, creating those building blocks at the district level, creating institutional mechanism where district collector, district industries officer and others are able to support an aspiring exporter is something that we are working on. Out of this, in about 500 odd districts, we have prepared a district-specific export plan. And we are working with the rest of the districts to prepare a district-specific export plan for the rest. There are a lot of emerging challenges, and India's export ecosystem will have to be aware of this. Building the supply chain resilience for critical minerals is something that we will have to work on, because we know on critical minerals we have a strong dependence on outside. So to what extent we will secure the continuous flow of critical minerals, and to what extent we align with like-minded countries for ensuring free flow of critical minerals is something that we'll have to work on. There are a lot of individual regulations which are coming up, which can potentially become a trade barrier for many of us. The carbon border adjustment tax that the EU is talking of is one regulation which is intended for ensuring the climate change or climate change induced global warming, but that can have an indirect impact on our trade. And to what extent are we able to mitigate or adapt to this ecosystem is something which will determine our ability to ramp up our exports. Similarly, standards and quality is something on which the government of India has put a lot of focus on in the last couple of years. We have come up with a large number of quality control orders to ensure that our domestic manufacturing is able to compete with the best and attain the standards which are required or benchmarked in the most developed countries. So that is one area on which we'll have to continuously focus and work on. Sustainability and labor standards is the big buzzword, and whether it is FTA negotiation or non-FTA bilateral discussion, these are issues on which the awareness of our industry and ability to adhere to these standards will also determine their ability to penetrate some of the developed markets. We have also seen this return to the industrial policy, and earlier the focus on services export was very high by some of these developed economies, but many of them are now actively wooing manufacturing to be restarted in these economies. And to that extent, some of the acts like CHIPS Act of US and EU, the Inflation Reduction Act, etc., are things which have the potential to possibly win away some of the manufacturing units from the developing economies to the relatively developed economies. Although it is too early to judge by these acts, the implementation will have to be seen. But this is a potential which will have to be kept at the back of one's mind. Going forward, the entire team of commerce, along with many of the line ministries and state government, is working on this sectoral strategy for achieving this 1 trillion exports. And what kind of policy interventions will support this? What kind of branding strategy? What kind of marketing strategy? What kind of quality standards will support this is a continuous effort by all of us. How do we bring in higher competitiveness for engineering, chemical, electronics, and high technology products, pharmaceutical products, is something that we are working on. So whether it is PLI, whether it is R&D, whether it is creating clusters like PM Mitra kind of things. So these are areas in which we are trying to see how our exporters can become more competitive. Then how do we leverage higher advantage of existing FTAs as well as sign FTAs with complementary countries is something that commerce is engaged with, and this will be one of our continuous efforts. Collaborating with states and districts to ensure higher export is one of our continuous activities. Then what kind of an institutional mechanism will support this is something that we are working on. So to support this kind of an initiative, we require a forward-looking as well as a nimble organization. To that extent, our whole DOC and DGFT will have to restructure itself, reinvent itself. And that is an exercise also which we are undertaking currently. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share our foreign trade policy as well as our goal for achieving this, reaching this 1 trillion ambition. There will be an occasion when I'll be taking questions from all of you. So with this, I thank TPCI for organizing this and thank all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I request you to please stay back, sir. Please come. I request Mr. Mohit Singla to please come on the stage to present the memento to sir. Thank you, sir, for gracing the occasion with your presence. You have made all of us proud with your distinguished work in numerous capacity. Ladies and gentlemen, Shri Santosh Kumar Sarangi is a 1994 batch IAS officer of Odisha cadre. He holds a degree in Master of Arts, Political Science from Delhi University and Master in Public Policy from Duke University, USA. In Odisha, apart from being district magistrate in 3 districts, he served in various sectors like education, tourism, mining and tribal affairs, science and technology. Between 2013 to 19, he served as Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, and handled responsibilities as Chairman APEDA and Chairman T-Board. He took charge on 16th April 2021 as the Additional Secretary to Government of India, Department of School Education and Literacy under the Ministry of Education, along with the charge of Chairperson NCTE New Delhi. Presently, Shri Sarangiji is working as Director General of Foreign Trade in the Department of Commerce, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause for him once again for our chief guest. Thank you so much, sir, for gracing the occasion with your presence. And now, before we have a panel discussion for which we all have been waiting for, allow me to conduct a small activity because I can see people have been sitting from long time here and they're getting fidgety also. So what about a short break where we can do a little exercise? So here is the activity wherein you have to just follow my instructions. Let's see how good are you in following the instructions. So all you have to do is, please listen to me carefully. All you have to do is, whatever I say, you have to follow that. So when I say 1, you have to keep stay seated. When I say 2, you have to stand up. When I say 3, you have to turn behind. When I say 4, you have to look at me and raise both the hands. Can you all stand up, please? First of all, I'll explain it to you again. Please, everybody, stand up. Requesting everyone to participate. You'll have fun. You will enjoy this activity. Please, everyone. Thank you. Okay, so when I say 1, you have to sit down like this. When I say 2, you have to keep standing. When I say 3, you have to turn behind. When I say 4, you have to look at me and raise both the hands. Okay? So let's start. 1. Do not follow my actions, okay? 2. 3. 4. Yes, I saw a couple of people who did not do it correctly. So now let's do it again, sir. It's done. Okay, let's do it again. 1, 2. 1, 2. Come on. 1, 2, 4. All right. Okay, those who are not doing it correctly can sit down. Can sit down. Let's see who's left in the end. Okay, it's dead. It's done. Okay, we're going to continue this activity after this. So thank you so much. Please be seated. So now we are starting with the panel discussion on the topic Trade Policy, Vision and Strategy in Dynamic Global Landscape. And I request our moderator for this session, Ms. Anuradha R.V., partner, Claris Law Associates, to please come and join us. Please give a big hand for her. For the panel discussion, we are pleased to welcome our guests of honor. Please welcome Mr. Sanjeet Singh, Senior Advisor, Niti Aayog. I request you, sir, to please take the distinguished chair. Along with our another guest of honor, Mohammad Noor Rahman Sheikh, IFS Joint Secretary, MEA. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big hand for him. I request you, sir, to please take your distinguished chair. Along with, I request Dr. Preetham Banerjee, Professor and Head, Center for WTO Studies and Member, Committee for Advanced Trade Research, TPCI, to please join us. I request Ms. Anuradha to please further introduce our panelists and kindly take over. Thank you. Check. Just raise the volume of this mic, please. It's very low.
Thank you. Thank you to TPCI. This is a wonderful opportunity and congratulations on a milestone that is, it's also very timely. And welcome to all the distinguished panelists. I'll very briefly introduce our panelists. We have Mr. Noor Rahman Sheikh, who is the Joint Secretary at the Ministry of External Affairs, heading the Economic Diplomacy Division. And he undertakes a wide array of activities ranging from trade, investment, energy, civil aviation, tourism, the International Solar Alliance, investment treaties, investment treaty arbitrations, UNCITRAL, social security agreements, and so on and so forth. Welcome to this panel, sir. We have Mr. Sanjeet Singh, who is a senior advisor at Niti Aayog, where his focus is on trade, commerce, economic, finance, and disinvestment. He also focuses on matters relating to international cooperation and economic dialogue, and he's also the coordinator for India's G20 presidency. Welcome, sir. We have Preetham Banerjee, who heads the Center for WTO Studies. Prior to heading the Center for WTO Studies, Preetham was the logistics sector specialist at the Asian Development Bank, and prior to that, he was a senior policy director with DHL Logistics. Welcome, Preetham, and look forward to an engaging discussion with the three of you. I'll start with Mr. Sheikh. I think we've had an excellent setting of stage with Mr. Sarangi's presentation on the foreign trade policy. And clearly, we are in a situation where India has a lot to look forward to. It is, uh, in a fairly unique position as of now. It's heartening to see India's growth and increasing engagement in a variety of international agreements. It's our growing stature in international diplomacy, which is also heartening. And yet there are many challenges. There was this wonderful slide that Mr. Sarangi had presented in terms of the challenges that you highlighted as the political, the economic, the environmental and military. So within this kind of a scenario, what do you think are the challenges and opportunities for India's growing engagement in international agreements?
Thank you, Radhaji. First of all, I'd also like to congratulate TPCI for having this inaugural conclave of India Business and Trade. I think DZFT Santoshji has clearly brought out all those challenges, the opportunities we have. In fact, I think it would be, of course, an eye-opening for many present here as well, that the kind of opportunities that we have in terms of manufacturing or all the sectors that are in the domestic front, we're aware of this. And I think with our Prime Minister's initiative for a focus on three T's, trade, tourism, and technology, I think this is a very concerted approach, whole of Government of India approach, whole of the India approach, I would say. It's not just the government and it's whole industry. Everyone is involved in this whole processes. I think every challenge, every crisis presents in itself an opportunity. We have seen it, and of course, we have seen the kind of impact it also has in terms of global value chain, supply chains, in terms of fuel, food, fertilizer security. We had to shift our sources of, either imports or exports. But I think it's a great thing that we are having certain great goals. Like when we have a 2 trillion export target by 2030, when we have something like a 30 trillion economy target by 2047, when you have a target for an Amrit Kal by 2047. So you have all your objectives aligned to it. I think we are, all our missions, because as being an MEA, so the whole thing is, of course, we work with all economic ministries, NITI Aayog and every other industry. We work very closely with industry chambers and others. In terms of keeping our missions, particularly the commercial wings, quite engaged and be aware of the opportunities that are available in India. If you talk of in terms of, say, investments coming into India, or in terms of having those export opportunities in those countries. I mean, Department of Commerce, particularly DZFT, has this Niryat portal which identifies top 30 items of its country. All our missions have an access to it. We have another dashboard, we call it 3T's dashboard. It's again a very recent dashboard which was developed after the instructions by the PM. The point here is every mission is aware of the opportunities that are available for India. Unlike, I keep saying this, probably in the past, when you talk about diplomacy, it used to be focus was on political diplomacy, and economic diplomacy would be somewhere in the, down the line, actually. But now you see the best people are put in the commercial wings, the best people, all ambassadors, all our high commissioners put their best foot forward to see that, there's this networking takes place. TPCI can himself would be witness to this fact that, in terms of their delegations, their opportunities. Earlier, commercial wings would basically be focused on, say, settling, or responding to trade queries, for example. It would not be into, market intelligence studies or in terms of networking or trying to do more than what is actually expected. So now we find that this is happening everywhere. So I think aligned with the opportunities in India, whatever policies are there, for example, one district, one product initiative is again aligned to all our missions. When we talk about the targets of 2 trillion economy, 2 trillion export or 30 trillion economy, the investment opportunities. So I think there's always a churning which is taking place in all our missions around the world to see that these are aligned, and I think this will grow. In fact, in 2021, 6 August, when Prime Minister launched the 400 billion export target, I think this whole skepticism was also there in various sectors, whether it is actually possible when the effects of COVID is still not not over. But I think we have surpassed it. We have this year reached $770 billion. I think we're on part of it, and I think there's a lot of synchronism that takes place between the ministries, various ministries of the government, agencies, trade chambers, industry members, and also the business community and other entities around the world. I think we're aware of the challenges present itself by the geopolitical challenges, but I think we are also aware that this presents an opportunity for ourselves. That's, I put it that way.
Thank you for that very optimistic note in terms of the fact that it's not just challenges, but also equally opportunities which we need to seize. I'll turn to you, Sir Mr. Sanjeet Singh, and clearly we are in a situation, as Mr. Sheikh was also pointing out, that agreements, international agreements, trade agreements, economic partnerships are not just about trade anymore. It's a bundle of various interconnected issues ranging from economic security as well as strategic interests that countries have and we share. At the same time, we are living in a world with increasing complexities in the nature of regulatory challenges. And this is also something which Mr. Sarangi's presentation had highlighted towards the end, where he spoke about various, the move towards perhaps a higher protectionism, greater self-reliance. The US CHIPS Act was one example. The Inflation Reduction Act is another example. We also have growing unilateralism, particularly the carbon border adjustment measure, the carbon taxes, which do present significant challenges, particularly because these are areas which are the subject matter of various other non-economic international agreements. In such a scenario, what is India's preparedness, and where do you see that India should focus on in order to create opportunities from these developments as well?
So first and foremost, thank you so much, Anada, for that question. And I would like to thank TPCI for organizing this. Least of all to once again bring me close back to my good friends. I know Santosh Sarangi is here. You can see Ajay and a number of other friendly faces. So thank you so much for that and for this very opportune time to discuss what are the potentials and of course the challenges which lie ahead in terms of India achieving its dreams. So my friend Mr. Sheikh just mentioned something before I go specifically try and answer this question which you have just mentioned, let's look at the context. Honorable Prime Minister has given a clarion call that India must quickly become Viksit Bharat, or a developed country. What does it mean? Does it just mean in terms of economic growth, having a robust GDP? It means we need to rapidly grow, and we need to grow in a sustainable manner and make sure that it is inclusive, so that the benefits of the growth of India reach each and every person of 1.4 billion population of India. Now, having said that, we are looking at a $30 trillion economy. We're looking at a time when the per capita income is going to be $20,000 per capita. Today it's about $2,400 US dollars. Many people have estimated that we may have already come very close to the tipping point. So once that begins to happen, then the rapid growth begins to continue with its own momentum. But having said all that, putting it in context, what Mr. Sarangi was mentioning about the foreign trade policy, that has to be taken in this context that exports are being recognized as a very integral part of India's growth story. Now, we have a large domestic market, there's no doubt about it. But at the same time, we have to really be able to export. We are talking about $750 billion around today, merchandise and services. And Mr. Sarangi and his team are already preparing for $1 trillion and perhaps even beyond that. So exports are going to contribute majorly to the GDP of India. And without that, we'll not be able to achieve the targets we are looking at. Now, having said this brief context, you may see that there are a number of efforts are being made from India. For example, the G20 presidency, which we are going through right now, is a major diplomatic exercise, not in terms of just diplomacy, but to ensure that our supply chains, our trade are all secured. So somebody had mentioned very clearly, why do you trade? Why do countries trade? Why do, for example, FTAs, you ask, why do people sign FTAs? We sign trade, we do trade so that we can develop our own respective economies, our own people. So that remains a predominant aim of why we are going to trade. Now, having said that, if you look at the FTAs, they have taken up a absolutely different element. If you look at the early 2000s, when we negotiated a number of FTAs with the East Asian countries, there from the Japan, Korea, ASEAN, to name a few, honestly, many industry stakeholders got back saying we burnt our fingers. We haven't got as much as we should have. We in fact given up much more. And yes, our trade balance became more adverse. Now, if you look at the end of the 2020s, this second decade, we are engaging now with our major trading partners. We went ahead and signed up with UAE, we have signed with Australia, now we are looking at UK, EU, Canada. We are signing up with developed countries because of the strength which has come from our export community, for our own industry, which is standing up and taking on the competition. But this, along with this, has come up with a number of other challenges. Now, my friend Ajay is here, and I'm sure he'll be speaking more about the challenges which come up when we sign FTAs with he has, of course, shared his views in private, so I'll not get into that. But he has his views, and so many other people hold views such that FTAs with developed countries have their own challenges. One of the very obvious things is that, look, their tariff barriers are absolutely already eliminated. We are the ones we are still holding on to tariff barriers, right? So all they're going to do is ask from us. Here comes in industry. And I'll be very candid here. Our communication with the industry has not been very good in the past 2 decades. But now things are changing. We have people like Mr. Santosh Sarangi and his team who are heading it. They're increasingly interacting with the industry and taking a feedback. But let me also share with you, whenever we talk to the industry, the first thing is, mat kariye. FTA karna, nahi, don't do it. No, you're going to get market access. No, we don't want market access. Don't give them any market access. But please understand, it's going to happen one way or the other. We are becoming an integral part of the global economy. Our markets are open. You cannot build up walls beyond a certain point. Yes, you can protect your critical sectors, but you cannot protect every sector. And is there a need to do that? Our industry has to start looking at this. And they need to communicate. And the good point is, many of our corporates, even MSME-led sectors, are increasingly saying, please get us more market access. And this is where the FTAs are leading to. Now, this is the intentions which are being expressed by the Indian industry, and which is very, very crucial. At the end of the day, a FTA or a preferential agreement is going to be signed for the benefit of government-signed agreements, but it is basically the business communities which do business, business entities which do business. But as I mentioned, the developed countries have their barriers, as a tariff, SPS, TPT, of course they exist, but they have really become old school because everybody is mastering how to get over them. But you mentioned CBAM, you mentioned labor standards, you mentioned, for example, climate. Now there's something called TSD, Trade for Sustainable Development. Now these are all what you can term as WTO extra, not even WTO plus. They're WTO extra, they are beyond trade, but they are affecting our trade today. CBAM is at our door. 2023 is when they are actually starting to measure the impacts. 2027, they will be hitting us with it. Now we may say, oh, it doesn't matter to me. It's the steel industry or maybe the fertilizer, big boys who are going to get hurt. No, down the line, we're all going to get hurt. Are we prepared? So I'm sure Ministry of Commerce is doing it. We at NITI are already focusing on how do we engage with industries, of course, through the ministries, relevant steel industry or fertilizer industry. We are going to reach out and talk to people. Are you ready? Are you ready to take on? This is becoming the norm. The second way we can actually prepare is start sitting on the rule-making table. CBAM was made without talking to us. They have their own concerns about climate. They are not taking into concern the fact that we have developmental challenges, our development concerns. G20 is one such huge effort, led by the Honorable Prime Minister himself. So it's a whole of government approach where you'll find a tussle, where the developed nations are pushing for climate change. Climate change is the main agenda. We are saying, no, sustainable development is the main agenda. And we are trying to explain to them, both of them represent the two sides of the same coin. So we need to start sitting on the rule-making table. Various standards when they are set. These are the new barriers of trade. You mentioned a couple of standards. Mr. Sarangi was mentioning a couple of standards which are coming up. The US has brought in a number of standards. How do we counter it? Can we not start engaging them well in time? So my request, in fact, and I would like to end my present remarks with this, is the industry and therefore seminars and meetings like the one which TPCI has organized today are very critical because they bring together people who are actually affected. So you must quickly tell us, look, this is coming. So government needs to wake up and start talking to them right now. We'll be happy to take delegations. We'll be happy to engage with them. Look, these standards are coming up. How do we counter it? How do we make sure that our voice is heard? So greater communication, greater awareness of the forthcoming challenges, and to develop countermeasures. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. And I think picking on the point that India should be on the rule-making table as far as these new issues are concerned, let me turn to Preetham on, to build a little bit on this vein. We are actually at the rule-making table at environmental conventions. We are one of the strongest countries which was the votary for, and we succeeded in building a very critical principle on common but differentiated responsibility. We also succeeded in making sure that there were strong provisions on financial resources, technological assistance, etc. At the same time, as both our previous speakers have mentioned, there is an increasing change in trade agreements, which all of us agree, and because trade agreements are no longer about trade alone anymore. They really are about a mix of other issues which are being brought into an economic agreement, into the framework of an economic agreement. We have distinct stand at the multilateral level where we have resisted non-trade issues, and India has not been participating in the rule-making table, to borrow Mr. Singh's phrase, as far as the trade and sustainability structure discussions are concerned, or even when it comes to e-commerce related aspects, MSME, gender, etc. At the same time, we find these as becoming increasingly part of our free trade narrative, part of our new free trade agreements that we're negotiating. What are your thoughts in terms of our preparedness? What are the thoughts in terms of what we need to think about while entering into these new age FTAs?
Thank you, Anuradha, for that question. And again, I'd like to start by congratulating TPCI for this event. And it's a pleasure to be part of this very august panel. To respond to your question, let me first rephrase and say what I think DGFT Mr. Sarangi also mentioned in his presentation. There's an increasing look in many of these developed countries at industrial policy. So this evolution that we are seeing, whether it's CBAM and a host of other, of these initiatives like deforestation issues have also been brought up. So some of them linked to environment, others to other, broad brush, we can call them sustainable development goals related to labor, gender, is also linked to industrial policy and therefore linked to trade policy. So they are not purely policies that look at, improvement of life per se. The reason why I say this is because in many cases, take CBAM, it is linked to Europe's domestic regulations on the environment. So the question is, if I am going to impose certain costs on my domestic industry, how do I equalize that and keep them competitive? So that's the question that European policymakers are asking, and therefore CBAM. So I have to have a border adjustment, and that's why even explicitly it says it's a border adjustment measure to counter from the cost that I'm imposing on my domestic industry. So you have developed countries taking a particular path towards certain goals. Now, there, I think the conversation that you started by saying in terms of the agreed upon principles, that we had, it breaks down because these countries are choosing certain pathways and they have to, keep their own competitiveness in mind. So the question for a country like India is threefold. One, we have an evolution which has been expedited by the pandemic in the way global value chains operate. So there is a differentiated understanding of risk, which actually creates opportunities for countries like India. But at the same time, you have issues such as these coming up. And to what extent can we have our policies that will help overcome these barriers? And that goes back to, I think, what Sanjit ji said very well, that you are going to have these walls erected, inevitable, right? I mean, this is something that will be driven by domestic regulations and policies in these countries. What can we do as a country to prepare our industry to jump over them? And this essentially has been the whole non-tariff measures debate, because these are non-tariff measures at the end of the day. So when I look back 20 years ago, or even 25 years ago, when the concept of HACCP first came, right, for our poultry industry and others, we had similar conversations. Of course, now those look much less complicated than CBAM. But at that point of time, they were actually super complicated measures to deal with. We had to develop means in our country for our exporters to deal with that. I remember, 1.5 decades ago when EU came up with REACH. And we had the similar discussions, and it's very complicated regulations. What are we going to do? We built over a period of time capacity. And I'd like to end, and I'm cutting on time, but I think the essential point is what the DGFT mentioned, that you have a twofold path. One is the path of FTAs, and there I think Sanjit ji is absolutely right. The marginal gain for India from pure tariff reduction is always going to be minimal, especially with developed countries. You're looking at margins of 2-3%. Yes, they make sense because you have the inward investment coming in, and those margins do have an impact because you are looking at two-way. If I'm going to set up a plant here in India, export to the market access I'm getting through an FTA, I'm a large MNC, I will also look at the landed cost of my intermediates into my country. So if my import tariffs in India are low and the tariffs are zero at the target market also, the overall margin impact is from a logistics point of view and the cost of capital, because you trap up capital with the payment of duty. And in large volumes, they actually are 2.5-3% in lots of goods. And that's a big margin, when you're playing with margins of 3.5% for competition, that's a big margin. So it does make sense in the global value chain sense. In many cases it doesn't, but it does in many specific sectors. But the key issue is, how do I use my FTAs to address non-tariff measures? To what extent are my domestic institutions prepared to up the game on that? And I think that's a work in progress. The second is on the domestic competitiveness side, where I think the DGFT, there's a slew of efforts in the cost of credit, logistics facilitation side, the whole concept of business facilitation, which is, related to, market access scheme is just one example, but there are several others. So we have to work on all of these fronts, and we have to understand on a sectors-wise, it's because every sector is different. And that's where I think forums like this need to deep dive. I think we are a little bit, and it's my personal opinion, I stand to be corrected, we tend to speak generally, and we tend to speak to industry also in general terms. You have to go out and speak to industry in very specific terms. And there also, so if I look at, for example, and I'll just end by this, one specific example here. If I look at my, let's say, my textile industry, there are so many sub-components within that. Sub-components by size, by the type of business they're doing, and the kind of markets they want to target. There are, specific firms who are looking purely at the East Africa, Middle East market, because that's the kind of produce, just by taste and preferences, by cost margins they are producing. There's an entire different segment of my industry which is looking at purely the European market. So I need to have that understanding and help, handhold, address NTMs accordingly. And it's not an easy thing to do. We are in very good hands, I think. The Department of Commerce is working extremely hard, looking at such details. But it's not going to be an easy journey. But I think as Noorji mentioned, our Prime Minister has set a very clear objective. And I think our Commerce and Industry Minister, in alignment, has set a very specific objective as well. So I think that alignment and that vision will help, and we'll get there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think in the interest of time, I'll just pose one final question to each of the panelists. I think each of you has highlighted that there are, of course, challenges, but then there are opportunities as well. And one of the key aspects in terms of what has happened in terms of major reform is the internal facilitation, as you pointed out, Preetham, in terms of trade facilitation and logistics facilitation, a point which had come in our DGFT's presentation as well. The emphasis on how this can actually facilitate our own competitiveness in terms of the strategies that we actually put in place within our countries. But again, picking up on the issue in terms of India at the rulemaking table, the fact is that we have been one of the strongest votaries of sustainability and sustainable development goals as well. Again, to pick up the acronym LIFE that the Prime Minister had coined in terms of what this really means for us, that one earth and one family and one future. At the same time, translating it into trade agreements, where increasingly each of you has noted that tariff barriers, particularly in developed country markets, have practically come down, and they're being replaced with newer challenges. And this is where the preparedness for our industry really needs to start focusing, so as to ensure that the rulemaking that India does at the international stage for SDGs, for environmental agreements, doesn't really get roughshod by trade challenges. So with this, what are your thoughts in terms of what more should the government really look forward to, both in terms of internal strategies and in terms of trade agreement negotiations? Mr. Sheikh, if you could start, and then Mr. Singh, and then
of course, that's a very good observation, because whatever targets we have set for ourselves, it has to be aligned, of course, with our domestic regulations, ecosystem, and opportunities available abroad. That's always there. But I think it is also important for us to also focus on areas which have not been traditionally considered very lucrative. For example, if we say in terms of, say, the African continent, we have something like 600 million people not having access to energy. That actually presents a huge opportunity for our industry, energy sector, to actually work on it. It could be a joint ventures with this country. So it's just not, I would not, as a diplomat, I would not like just to be, on increasing just the export part of it, but of course to enhance India's standing globally. That is where you see, as we just took over the Z20's presidency, Prime Minister had, this thing hosted the Voice of Global South Summit. There were 2 sessions by him, the opening and closing, and there were other 8 sessions. One was of trade and industry ministers, which was convened by our CIM. I was, in fact, coordinating for that session. In fact, one of the sessions, he says that, the countries that participated in a particular session were, something like Central African Republic and Belize and Benin and things like that. And he said during one of his, observations that, these are countries which actually need a lot of focus from a bilateral aspect also, in terms of, say, the energy aspect, I said. Some of these countries did not have internet or power, to even conduct that VC. So we had to actually request UNDP office in a country where it had power supply with internet connectivity and all. So I think our vision needs to be broadened. I understand, of course, European and probably the Americas, North American part is an important aspect in terms of the margins that one can actually look at. But other countries also offer, or other regions also offer the equal opportunity. I think that's, and then probably we can think of having a manufacturing. So obviously we cannot replace all our imports by the manufacturing that we do. It will always be there. So obviously everyone here would appreciate this. So I think it's good that if we are able to explore those other aspects also, so that we become just not a focus on our own growth, but also as a global leader. I think that's important.
Thank you, Mr. Sheikh. Well, Mr. Singh, if you could express your thoughts, final comments in a minute, and then Preetham another minute, because the organizers have reminded me that we need to move to the next session.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Yeah, so I'll just try and wrap up in a minute, and I'll just make a couple of points. So first, of course, came up very specifically about, you see, the reality of the present trade situation, post-pandemic, post-China, whatever you want to call it, is that the rules of the game are being reset. But multilateralism is here to stay, and India, as for one, is really supporting multilateralism. But this is not the multilateralism of the WTO days. We are now looking at new concepts of friendshoring and what you may. At the end of the day, we trade, we are signing our agreements to basically ensure India's interests. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that is how it is. Of course, we are a global leader. We are emerging as a huge, in fact, a major voice of the South. But this we can best serve when we protect India's interests. And India's interest is when we make sure that our export markets continue to be secure, well-developed, and grow. Secondly, that our supply chains continue to be protected and stay resilient. For example, a Ukrainian war in Ukraine, etc., really shook up something very critical like fertilizer or for the energy. It is to the credit of this government that we could even negotiate this huge crisis, which in any other time would have been really devastating for the economy of India's size. And yet we are maintaining a growth rate of 8%. The second point emerging from this one is about our markets. Now, you may have, as we globalize, we are increasingly going to look at, and I'm sure there are a number of people who are exporting to our traditional export partners like the US or European Union. Now, it's the writings on the wall. They are going to go through recession. There's no doubt about it. And when they go through recession, they are going to buy less. They're going to buy less from a country like India. So if we are going to be just being dependent on that, we are going to be facing a hit. For no ostensible reason. There's no challenge on the Indian side except the fact that the purchasing power of these countries are going to go down. So what is our answer to that? So a number of things were positively mentioned. We look at new markets. How do we grow there? And then increasingly, we cannot keep just depending on the domestic market, but yes, domestic market is very important. We are looking at a 400 million strong middle class, which is with a huge purchasing power. So our industry has to really gear up to get a mix of the two. And here I know, with Ministry of Commerce being here and I being ex-Minister of Commerce myself, it is incumbent on the government also to think in terms of allowing flexibility in policies which allow an industrial entrepreneur to switch between domestic and export markets. If we bind them too much in that, look, you're committed to export, and in sector structure or policy structure, then we are very badly off. And the third, of course, is what we mentioned about preparing ourselves to ensure that our supply chains remain resilient. Now, this is happening, but the crucial part is that our industry, which is dependent on these supply chains, also has to be absolutely proactive. They need to reach out. For example, I'll give you one example, and I'll end with that, on ACC batteries. We are very, very, very focused on EVs and producing a lot of EVs and the batteries. Now, batteries have a critical component called lithium. And there's a limited supply of lithium. There are only a few countries, like Australia, China, or that Australia and the Bolivia, Argentina triangle, Chile Triangle, that is exporting. Are we aggressively going out and investing? So to secure our interest in critical minerals, critical supply chains is something which is increasingly going to become more and more important.
Thank you. Preetham, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I will quickly. So, I'll talk about 5 C's, right? You said, how do we take on this storm? The first one is coalesces, build coalitions, right? So we have to build coalitions in the voice of the global south, etc., because you have to drive the dialogue over here. That leads to the second C, which is counter. So the proposals that are coming from these countries, based on our principal stands in the multilateral forums, we should have a counter proposal that we can be able to table, which is well thought through. The third C is communicate, because it is just not about developing a counter, but communicating it to the rest of the world, convincing the vested interest groups in those countries that our counter actually meets their needs of environmental goals or labor protection goals without linking it to the specific design that these countries are proposing. So it's not antagonistic to them in that sense. The third would be to have collaboration. So, and this goes back to the FTAs, because there is the multilateral route, but there is also, be able to do in practical terms, overcome those barriers, what we need to do in the FTA negotiations. Last but not the least, the fifth C is competency, which is the capability development in your own country with our industry. So we have to have this 5C strategy for each and every one of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you, and thanks to the organizers.
Thank you, ma'am, for concluding and conducting the session smoothly. And to all our panelists for sharing your valuable insights and reflective knowledge to create real value and takeaways for the audience. I request Mr. Mohit Singla to please come on the stage to present the memento to our guests of honor, Mr. Sanjeet Singh and Mohammad Noor Rahman Sheikh. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. We're going to felicitate all the panelists and moderators post all our sessions. Thank you so much. Can we put our hands together? Come on, everyone. I request all of you to please come for a group picture. So next we have fireside chat with DGFT on FTP 2023, shaping the future of India's trade resilience, including we have for the same our chief guest, Shri Santosh Kumar Sarangi, and our moderator, Mr. Om Prakash Hisaria, Senior VP, Reliance Industries. I request both of you to please come on the stage. I request the moderator, Mr. Om Prakash Asaria, to please take over.
DGFT doesn't need an introduction in this room. We have heard his views on the FTP and the trade scenario in the coming years in the morning, such an elaborate and well-elucidated presentation, sir. Sir, before I start my talk, I would just want to ask you one question, being informal. What is the secret of your smile? I've never seen you wearing your smile. Or do you really sometimes lose your smile, despite being DGFT and despite facing such kind of...
Well, I think you can't have a secret behind your smile. If you have that secrecy, you can't smile.
Well said, sir. All of you who have interacted or with DGFT in his office or at a public forum, you all must have had the same observation, that whatever be the situation, sir always looks to be in control, always looks to be having a solution which he can provide to the trade, to the industry, and to the individual grievances that exporters off and on keep having and coming back to you, sir. Sir, while coming for this chat, like a diligent student, I made certain notes. But after your presentation, I find that all my notes have become useless. So whatever I wanted to ask you, you have already spoken, and in a with a much better perspective than I could have imagined. So sir, I would focus in this on some of the micro issues which have arisen out of this foreign trade policy. The first issue which the industry is really, grateful to the government and DGFT is this amnesty scheme. Over a long period of time, there have been situations like Indian exports were sluggish for a very long period of time. During that period, in good faith, industry took export obligations, which they were unable to fulfill despite their best efforts. And now this amnesty has come like a godsend. So what are the thinking behind this scheme, and what are your expectations from industry for this amnesty scheme?
Well, this amnesty scheme is in line with the government's thinking that we should resort to alternative dispute resolution. Instead of dragging people to the court or giving them notices, one should find out more respectable way of fulfilling one's obligation and finding a redemption rather than going through a dispute process with an individual exporter. So continuing with this trend of Vivad se Vishwas, this is an amnesty scheme which provides people to fulfill their export obligation, whether it is totally unfulfilled or partially fulfilled. They can fulfill their export obligation by paying the basic duties which were foregone at that point of time, as well as the interest only on the basic custom duty. So the additional special duty and the special custom duty which was paid, for that interest calculation will not be done. So to that extent, for people who had taken licenses in 9, 10, 11, 12, so in those kind of period, theoretically the interest calculation would have been phenomenal, but now it is being limited to the interest only on the basic custom duty, and that provides them an opportunity to pay up this amount and get the duty redemption and fulfill the export obligation. So this is in continuation with a trust-based relationship to be maintained with the exporters, and the government's attempt to ensure that alternative resolutions are a much better mechanism to deal with exporters and allow them another opportunity to restart their export commitments.
Sir, I'm sure the trust which government has reposed in exporters by giving this amnesty would be reciprocated, and many of the exporters, especially the small exporters who have suffered, they would be starting a new dawn in their businesses by removing these past obligations that have been persisting despite their best efforts. So the second thing, which again a very micro level question, we talk of, we realize that e-commerce exports are the next big thing. The policy talks a lot about it. There are some concrete measures at the moment, and there are some indications that there would be things in the offing. The way we look at it, in a few years to come, the e-commerce exports itself should reach $200 billion. So most of these exports that we expect, you also mentioned in your presentation, they'll be B2C, and they would be led by MSMEs, unlike the conglomerates like the auto manufacturers or the Reliances of the country. Any specific strategy that government has in mind, especially with respect to tax remission of these exports by the MSMEs? Because large exporters are getting their tax remissions, B2B people. But how to provide this tax remission to these small exporters and other facilitation, of course?
Theoretically, this tax remission is available to any exporter who is exporting with an IEC code. But with regard to e-commerce, the issues are much more complex. In e-commerce, sometimes the original exporter is, or original manufacturer, or the jeweler, or pharma producer, or the handicrafts handloom producer may not be exporting. It is the aggregator who, so the seller on record and the exporter on record are different in e-commerce play. And to that extent, the remission is a slightly complex issue. Nevertheless, whoever is exporting is entitled for a remission provided the ECCS system, the electronic cargo clearance system, starts talking with IceGate and the information flows to IceGate. So as on date, we are in talks with Department of Revenue, CBIC, to ensure that ECCS and IceGate have an integrated system which will allow the shipping bills to flow into IceGate. Similarly, Department of Post also provides e-commerce facility, and ensuring that the postal bill of exports also flows seamlessly into the IceGate is also a requirement. So on all of this, we are working to ensure that these systems start talking to each other, and once they start doing it, the export benefits also flow into the hands of the exporters. So a lot of ease of doing of business which is required in e-commerce play, including to tweak some of our regulations to ensure that B2C kind of procedures are also relooked at. For example, when you are doing e-commerce exports, it is assumed that 15 to 20% products will come back as return goods. So when you are exporting on a B2B basis, either your whole consignment will come back in case it is rejected, or it will get sold. But only a small fraction of that coming back is not generally done in B2B exports. So we have to build in regulations, we'll have to build in principles which will facilitate these kind of issues which are specific to e-commerce. And on that, as I said, we are working with Department of Revenue, RBI, with some of the banks, with the e-commerce players themselves, and Department of Posts.
That's great, sir, because that will definitely increase the competitiveness of our e-commerce exports and exporters who are mainly in the MSME category. So again, coming back to, for many years, the theme of export promotion in India has been to move away from incentives or subsidies to remission. For the first time, so explicitly this has been laid down in the policy, in all the declarations. In this context, what role, sir, I mean, to be very frank, being from private sector, I can say, what role exactly the government would play so far as promotion of exports is concerned?
For promotion of exports, it was presumed earlier that incentives play a big role. But when we did a time series analysis and saw and tried to find out a correlation between MEIS and exports, we saw that there is no correlation at all. There are years in which we have given highest amount of MEIS, but we ended up with lowest exports. So there was no correlation at all, and we saw, and when we analyzed the profile of exporters who were cornering MEIS, we saw only a small number of exporters who were cornering a large share of MEIS. So the government started thinking of a more equitable mechanism, and that way this transition to a remission-based model is where you reimburse all the taxes and duties which are paid in the process of exporting a product. And to that extent, it is legitimate, it is WTO compatible, and it also ensures the exporter to be more competitive in the overseas market, because the fundamental principle is taxes and duties are not supposed to be exported. So if you are collecting taxes and duties, which may be slightly on the higher side depending on which market, I mean which domestic country is imposing how much of taxes, remitting that tax and duties from your export value actually enables an exporter to be much more competitive in the global marketplace. And going forward, that's going to be the model. As far as the other part of Mr. Hisaria's question is concerned, what kind of role will government play in promoting exports? This will be more of a facilitating role, and as I pointed out, ensuring digital enablement, where an exporter, if an exporter has given a requisition for an appointment with one of my RAs, then we are building in facilities where one can give a VC request, and I can monitor from here if that VC request has been accepted or rejected. If it has been accepted, what is the time gap within which this has been accepted? If it is not being responded to, then what is the period for which that request is just lying pending? So similarly, if deficiency letters are being issued to exporters, then what is the number of times a deficiency letter is being issued? So that kind of analysis we are now doing in DGFT to ensure that a particular exporter doesn't get more than 2 deficiency letters. If there are more than 2, then we ask our regional authority why they have to ask for a 3rd deficiency letter when they have already responded twice. So these are the kind of digital enablement which will happen. Similarly, for market access, doing more and more FTAs, ensuring that our industry is able to take FTA advantages, doing overseas market promotion in a much bigger manner, doing RBSMs, the reverse buyer-seller meets, in a much bigger manner. If you go to a Hanover Messe, if you go to Gulf Food Dubai, if you go to Biofac in Nuremberg, you see the whole world assembling there for buying and selling of products. Why can't we have a Biofac scale of organic event in India? Why can't we have a Gulf Food Dubai kind of a scale in India? So going forward, our ambition will be to create this kind of institutional promotion events which will compete with the best in the world.
Definitely, sir. Some proof we are already seeing while interacting with DGFT offices. The way you explained the number of deficiency letters, the appointments, being the largest exporters, and I handling that, I can vouch for it that things have definitely, I mean, I'm sure the people in the hall also would vouch for the kind of changes that we are seeing, and we hope that And of course, incentives being WTO incompatible, perhaps that also worked on government's mind while moving away from incentives to remissions. Sir, on this district export hubs, we all understand these are long-term policies with fairly long gestation period. But DGFT has spent a lot of resources and manpower till now in last 2 years. Sir, can you share some early success stories which really, make your heart glow that, okay, we are on the right path?
I think in the recent inauguration of Crown Prince Charles as the King of England, quite a few ODOP products were utilized and they were highlighted in the Indian media. So ODOP and District Export Hub together have huge potential. The branding of ODOP products, the branding and marketing of District Export Hub has a huge potential, and going forward, e-commerce can be a good conduit for marketing of these handicrafts, handlooms, made-ups and fabrics in the textile segment, the ready-made garment segment, the jewelry, especially the tribal jewelry as well as other gems and jewelry, studded jewelry, and over-the-counter drugs, pharmaceutical. These are products which are going to have a huge potential, and this will facilitate our Ayush products, our natural beauty care products, our gems and jewelry manufacturers to export in a much larger number. And how do we ensure that our district level players are able to onboard these e-commerce platform and are able to display and market their product is going to be one of our big initiative in the current year. And we are going to launch a huge outreach program where we will train up our artisans, our weavers, our jeweler manufacturers to onboard e-commerce platforms and export their products directly from the districts without being dependent on anyone else.
I'm sure, sir, given the digital infrastructure that country has created, these initiatives will have a definite positive impact on our many of the backward areas which have a lot of products to provide to the world or amaze the world with their handicraft. Sir, with your permission, can we have a few questions from the audience? So, DGFT would accept 4 questions from the audience. Kindly raise your hand and you can put the questions to DG. Yeah, please, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'm Ashok Sehgal from the CII MSME Council. So you have touched upon the question of deficiency letters being issued, and if more than 2 are issued, then you will be monitoring it. That's a very welcome step. I'd just like to mention that our experience is that these deficiency letters are issued at a fairly low level in the DGFT organization, generally signed off by the Trade Development Officer. Now, when we respond to these, the next deficiency letter comes with the same wording, with no recognition or acknowledgement or comment on the reply which has already been given. Now, my request is that if you see that this cycle goes through twice or thrice, you may create an opportunity. It's very good of you to say we can come and have a cup of tea with you, but apart from that, if we request a meeting with a higher level officer who can look at the matter and has the capability and authority to take a decision on the representation made by the exporter, rather than leaving it to a trade development officer, who I assume does not have that authority or flexibility at their level, then such an opportunity should be created, maybe once in a month, a particular day, to have a face-to-face meeting with a fairly senior person at the regional level where this could be discussed across the table and a practical decision taken rather than just going by the rule books, which is what the lower down officers have to do.
Thank you. Accepted. We are tweaking our IT system to ensure that after 2 deficiency letters, the 3rd deficiency letter will not happen at the same level. It will be escalated to the next level. So the next higher authority will have to satisfy himself that a 3rd deficiency letter is due. Similarly, if after that also there is a deficiency, because there are sometimes exporters who don't actually answer what is being asked. Sometimes they'll prevaricate or they'll answer in a different manner. But nevertheless, if it is going for a 4th time, then it will get escalated to the next higher level. Similarly, we are building in a VC mechanism, video conferencing mechanism, within our BO portal, where if somebody has asked for an appointment with a particular authority, we should be in a position to monitor what is the time period for which this request for VC appointments are pending. So we are building in those kind of features into our system.
Hi, good afternoon, sir. Am I audible? Yeah, my name is Rahul Srivastav, and I am from processed food industry. This question actually I wanted to put to earlier panel also, and probably you would be the right. Whenever we talk of contribution in GDP and our economy a target of 5 trillion or 3 trillion, I mean, we are concentrating more on exports. And probably somewhere we are not thinking in terms of blended approach towards imports also, because in my industry I'm dealing exports and imports both. So, and we are facing difficulties especially in imports. So
what kind of difficulties in imports?
I'll tell you, since you have asked me, when we are importing a particular commodity, I'll take an example, oats, oat grains and KDHO, clean hulled dried oats, which all of us are aware the oat flakes which we are eating are not that's the final product. Actually, it's the grain and then it's hulled and dried. So we are importing both. We are importing grain as well, we are importing KDHO as well. But as far as the fumigation and fumigation related problems on customs are concerned, we are facing difficulties. Countries like Canada, countries like Chile, they have banned a particular substance which is actually detrimental to ozone layer. I'll name it, it's just methyl bromide. But in our case, if fumigation certificate is not having that particular compound on the certificate, we will have to pay 5 times the duty on the port. So these kind of problems, what I'm saying is probably it's a time that we should have a blended approach towards both the things.
Hasn't it been simplified in the last 3-4 months? This requirement of methyl bromide and allowing another fumigation technology to be used, I believe that has been, what, aluminum phosphide has been allowed?
Aluminum phosphide is being talked about, is being in discussion, but still, sir, what is happening is if we have a certificate with phosphide, and then if we go to port, custom still will fumigate it again, the container, and overhaul, I mean, the five times penalty is still there. So that is which is a pain point. But there are others, I mean, what I am actually coming up with is probably we should have a blended approach so that both the sides, imports as exports. So
I think India has been a fairly free economy as far as imports are concerned. We had imports of $714 billion last year. So a $714 billion import cannot happen if you don't have a blended approach. But this particular issue of fumigation is something which has been going on for quite some time. I know agriculture, the plant quarantine division, and customs are working together to find a solution to this. And for a few commodities, including pulses, solution has been found and provided. But for your commodity, it has not been done. So please do give a petition to the plant quarantine along with a copy to us. We'll initiate a discussion on this whenever that forum meets. I'm aware of the discussion in that particular NCTA forum. So we'll take this up as well in that forum.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Gopal Mittal, representing telecom sector industry, COEI. It's a body of all telecom operators. This is regarding ease of doing business and for clarity on certain regulatory challenges. Operators do provide a facility for international roaming to foreign operators and to foreign citizens, but due to having some regulatory, in the absence of some regulatory challenges, they need to face notices, this is not export of services. And because of that, they need to do litigation, lot of wastage of time, it's against the ease of business. The request is, if the sector is specific, sessions or meetings can be conducted like it used to be done in service tax, used to be done in GST, and they used to have sessions, meetings, and then representation can be taken, or we can have a separate representation to you so that litigation can be reduced. And this is just the examples, plus there are a few more issues on the sector.
I don't know whether a solution of this lies with DGFT or not. Your issue might have to do a little more with Department of Telecom and MeitY regulations. But do send us a written representation on this. We'll try and coordinate with Telecom and MeitY on this issue.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Manan Gandhi. I have actually 2-3 questions. Thank you for your presentation. It was very crisp and numbers were very good to hear. So my first question is, as you know, there are a lot of anti-dumpings are imposed on China, particularly on the bolt washers and screws made of MS steels. This industry in China exports around about $100 million to Europe and $200 million to US and Canada. And India is the next promising bet after the Taiwanese for the cheap bolts, washers and screws. But here what I have been studying, and I'm also an export merchandiser, that this industry is not well organized. The big industrialists are towards the auto parts, but for the export orientation for this industry is very less. But I see a lot of potential here. And but what happens with this industry, the raw material, there is only 2-3 players who holds the major raw material output, like Jindal and Tata, but their prices are at par with the normal steel, and China has recently reduced 25% in their pricing to negate the anti-dumping of 40%. So what is the role as you for this industry you can play? Because this is one of the most promising sectors I feel we can do. At least the share of 50% India can do for the exports in Europe and US. So one is this question. Second is the IS standards. You mentioned in the presentation that you are doing the standard upgradation also. What I have studied in our IS or BIS standards are mainly derived from the UK standards, not from the EU or US standards. But now, if you see, the exports are more from the EU and US, not from the UK. So our standards needs to be synchronized with their standards also, which can enable all the industrialists to work upon on the same line as per the market demand. And the third question is packing solutions. Like if you see, when we go for the exports, some part of cost is also the right packing. And China has very good, you can say, the Industry 4.0 packing solutions. Like the product comes directly to the packing end. And here in India, the manual packing is a problem. And second, the paper is a very big problem. Same, in the raw material case for the paper, there are only 2-3 players in India who is holding the major share of paper market. And it's kind of a syndicate, and we cannot compete the China prices also. So all these 3 questions, I would like to have your advice.
Thank you. When you ask more than one, remembering the question is a bit of a challenge, so if I forget so. The first one issue was pertaining to DGTR. DGTR anti-dumping duties are a quasi-judicial process where a proper investigation is done over a period of time. Opportunity is given to stakeholders to furnish their comments. The concerned country is also allowed to represent and furnish their views.
I will precise my question, sir. Sorry to interrupt. So there is an anti-dumping imposed by European and US for the bolts, washers and screws.
Oh, it is an anti-dumping duty there by EU and US.
Yes. So we, as an Indian, we have an advantage of at least 40%. If India suppliers sells this to them, we can get a 40% margin.
No, but what is holding you back? Anti-dumping duty imposed by India?
No, the holding back is the raw material prices, because China has reduced their prices in raw material, but India as per the market, they have not reduced. But when the China...
So how do you expect government to influence Tatas and Jindals to reduce their prices?
We cannot say that, how to do that.
If we can do it with them, we can do it with you also tomorrow. Are you ready for that?
We are ready to achieve the target of 1 trillion exports.
The second issue was relating to?
Standards, IS standards.
IS standards. IS standard is something where the implementation will have to be gradual, because there is a little bit of a pushback from the Indian manufacturers at times. Because a sudden transition to a higher standard implies costs, it implies investment in capital goods, machinery, and also in a lot of compliance to be arrived at for achieving that standard. But your point is well taken that gradually we must aspire to reach a standard which is aspired by the most developed countries. So that should be a gradual process. On this, please remain engaged with BIS to ensure that the transition happens smoothly. The third one was on packing. Solution. I couldn't really get your issue on the packing. I mean, to transit to a industry 4.0 standard as China is done with packing material will come with time. We have some industries who are adapting industry 4.0 standard for packing. I don't know whether it is happening in your industry or not. But that's something where people like Mr. Hisaria and others will have to motivate their masters to invest in India for better packaging.
Okay, is there any provision that we buy the packing material for exports and we don't pay the anti-dumping in India? Like for the paper, if we import the paper, we need to pay some anti-dumping.
If you are going to use packing material for exports, then I'll advise you to take it under advance authorization where you don't have to pay duty.
Okay, thank you.
In fact, up to 5% of value of exports they can import under duty-free under advance license.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sure there would be many more questions, but we are running behind schedule, and DGFT is so accessible that you can always address these questions at some different forum or seeking time from him. So, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hisaria.
Thank you on behalf of TPCI for finding time and spending the first half of our working day with us. Thank you very much, sir. Grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
A big round of applause for DGFT, please.
I request both of you to please come forward for your picture. Humongous thanks to our chief guest for putting profound ideas in lucid terms a layman can understand, and thank you to the moderator for conducting it so smoothly. Thank you, gentlemen. So this is the third session, last session of the day. we have a panel discussion now on the topic Achieving the US dollar 2 trillion export vision, to be moderated by Dr. Preetham Banerjee, Head, Center for WTO Studies, IIFT and member, Center for Advanced Trade Research, TPCI. I request you to please come on this stage. Now let me first introduce all our panelists, and then after that I would request them to kindly come together to take the distinguished chair for the panel discussion. So in this session our panelists are Dr. Pralok Gupta, Associate Professor, Center for WTO Studies, IIFT and member, Center for Advanced Trade Research, TPCI. We have Mr. Ajay Srivastava, co-founder, Global Trade Research Initiative. Next, we have Mr. Atul Govil, Chief Transformation Officer, Business Head of Biopolymers, India, Business Head Biopolymers, India Glycols. Then we have Mr. Devashish Garg, Director, Sri Lal Mahal Group. Then we have Major Jyoti Joshi Mittal, Head of Rail South Asia at AP Moller, Maersk. I request all the panelists to please come on the stage and be seated. I request Dr. Preetham Banerjee to kindly take over. Ladies and gentlemen, can we put our hands together? Come on, everyone.
So a very good afternoon. I think we'll go straight into the session because we are standing in between you and lunch, and we'll try to be as efficient as we can. We are very, very fortunate to have a very, very distinguished panel over here with a diversity of experience, and that I think will lead to a great discussion. I'll briefly introduce our panelists. We have here with us Major Jyoti Joshi Mittal. She brings several years of experience in logistics. She's currently the head of intermodal operations for Maersk Group here in South Asia. She has also been in the army and has actually been part of active counterinsurgency operations, which are also in many ways actually a logistics game. So I think she brings a great amount of domain expertise, and we'll have, I'm sure, some great insights from her. We have Devashish Garg. Devashish is a serial entrepreneur, what I could make out from his introduction. Of course, he is representing the Lal Mahal Group, which is one of the biggest names in the rice exports in that sector. But he's also in the hospitality industry, and what I can see is that he is also through an enterprise called Y Farm Organics Limited, has been a pioneer in the field of protected cultivation and modern farming technologies. So he brings in a lot of expertise, wide expertise in that domain. We have with us Mr. Atul Govil, who is the Chief Transformation Officer and Business Head of Biopolymers for India Glycols Limited. India Glycols is a well-known name in the chemicals industry, and he has a lot of experience in operations. He's also been in the IT and IoT, which is the linked logistics. In fact, the supply chain management part of it. So that's fantastic to have you here, sir. We have with us Mr. Ajay Srivastava, who is an old friend of mine. It's a pleasure to be here with him. He's an Indian Trade Service officer who has been an integral part of India's trade negotiations in the formulation of India's foreign trade policy, brings years of experience in that field, but currently he is heading his own research and consulting unit, which is called the Global Trade Research Initiative. And I think that introduction does him injustice. It's a lot of domain expertise that goes behind that institute right now. I have with me my colleague from the Center for WTO Studies, Dr. Pralok Gupta, who's an expert in the domain of trade in services. He has been an active part of trade negotiations in services on behalf of Government of India in many free trade agreements. He has been a part of the task force on services exports, which looked at the development of the sector, and he's also been a part of the interministerial subgroup on data in trade in services, and he brings a lot of domain expertise in that area. So a very distinguished panel, and I have been given a certain run of events, but I'll not stick to it, and I'll follow a little bit of my own logic with your permission. And I will probably start first with Mr. Ajay Srivastav to give us a macro view. And my question to you, sir, would be, we had a discussion on the FTAs in the previous two sessions as well. And there's always this debate, are FTAs good for us or FTAs bad for us? I'll not want you to get into that debate. But what I would want you to, use your experience to, discuss with us is what do you think we can do more through our FTAs to help our industries get better market access, perhaps to, be able to leverage the FTAs, what it offers better? And how is the whole FTA strategy can be better linked to our industrial policy as well as our trade promotion policy, because they are the three legs which really run the export. This whole vision of 2 trillion exports will be a combination of factors, the market access in foreign countries, but also our industrial policy and our export promotion policy. So what are your thoughts on that, sir?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Pritamji. So my take on FTA is very simple. Right now, the exports happening through the FTA partner countries are about 25% of India's total exports. But the way we are going ahead with USA, with the European Union, with UK, and many other countries, I think in next few years, after the completion of these FTAs, more than 70% of our trade will be happening through the FTA partner countries. So, for me, the strategy for a firm should be very simple. Everyone, even if you are an exporter or a non-exporter, you are simply selling the domestic market, you will be affected by the FTAs. So you should be doing some smart exercises, which means just writing down your product's name and import-export profile. Even if you are selling the domestic market, see if that product is traded. If it's traded, if it's imported, what's the import duty, and if it goes down to zero from a particular country, how much competitiveness you will be losing. Similarly, if you are gaining, if you are talking about exports, then you should know the duties and other barriers in the partner country. Through FTA, how much price edge you will be getting. So all this has to be done at a product level, at the HS code, tariff line level. So it's very simple exercise. So we say just list your products, keep 1 or 2 pages for each product, and do this exercise for all the countries with whom we are negotiating FTAs. So this has to be done by all the exporters, importers, and people who are not doing these but only focusing on domestic market. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajayji. Thanks for that insight. If I now may move on to Pralok, you have been looking, so this $2 trillion target is just not for goods, it's goods and services. And we have seen in recent times services really do quite well. I have, kind of two related questions for you. One, of course, we know that, we have a tremendous competency in IT and IT-enabled services. But the nature of, especially post-pandemic, we are seeing that a lot of other services are also being delivered remotely. So they are falling into this wider ambit of IT-enabled services. So how do you see that play out, and what do you see, India's competency and how we can grow our exports more in that area? Second question is that there's been a lot of talk about, that we have this kind of over-dependence on this ITITS. What are some of the other sectors in services you think that we have the potential to grow our exports in? And, what kind of markets we'll be looking at in that context?
Thanks, Dr. Pritam, and thanks TPCI also for this invitation. So you correctly pointed out that this target of 2 trillion is not for goods but for services also. So 1 trillion target is for services, and not to my surprise, because I have been privy to this kind of phenomena earlier also, not much discussion is happening on how to achieve 1 trillion target for services. Most of the discussion is on how to achieve 1 trillion for goods only. And we have seen around 27% growth in services last year. We are around 326 billion services, 27% higher than the last year. And please be mindful that this 326 billion is including of tourism services, which was in 2019 pre-pandemic year was around 30 billion. And in 2021, it reduced to only 9 billion. So around 20 billion was lost in tourism services. So it shows that there is a significant potential in services sector. But as you have pointed out, we are overly dependent on a few markets and on a few modes. I will come to your first question subsequently. Our dependence only on IT services is so much that almost 50% of services exports only from the IT or IT-related services. And out of this 50% of services, around 80% is going to 3 markets: US, Canada, and in Europe, UK. So now you can see if there is anything is happening in these 3 markets or with respect to IT services, that is going to affect our services. Now, in order to reduce this dependence, we have to diversify, we have to work on other services and other markets. So one is, of course, the tourism services. It got affected temporarily through the pandemic, but we have a lot of scope. Why we have a lot of scope? You think of any kind of tourism, whether religious tourism, it's sports tourism, or nature tourism, or wellness tourism, any kind of tourism, we have ample thing to offer to foreign tourists. It's only that we have to build on our capacities and create a conducive environment so that foreign tourists come here and enjoy that kind of service. And that goes without saying that tourism is the most employment creating sector. So even from the job perspective, that is much better. Similarly, some business services, for example, like architectural services or the professional services, even the audit and accounting, in legal services, we are gradually opening up. Recently, there are guidelines for the foreign law firms by the Bar Council of India. Services like health services, education services in the National Education Policy specifically mentions how to attract foreign students here. So these are the things which we are talking about, but unfortunately, concreteness of the planning or even the business interest, that is not coming up. So if there are representatives from industry here, I request to take care of these other services also. Yeah. And coming back to your first question with respect to over dependence on mode 1, this is true that mode 1 has gained more significant importance post-COVID, but again, if we are overly dependent on mode 1, and we can definitely see that going forward this will be the case, the digital economy is going to affect each and all of us. But at the same time, the other modes like mode 2, I said tourism services or medical tourism, similarly mode 3, our investment in other countries, that will also be important. Otherwise, what will happen? Right now, our mode 1 dependence for IT services is around 80%, and for overall services, it is around 60%. So it will again be a case of over-dependent on a particular mode. And if anything, suppose tomorrow US comes up with stringent regulation which affect our mode 1 trade, or maybe EU or Canada, then all those exports will be adversely affected. So in order to counter those things, we have to have a diversified approach, not only for markets, not only for services, but also for modes also. Thank you.
Thank you, Pralok, for that detailed answer. I think one of the things we were discussing in the previous sessions also, that how we need to look at specific sectors. and understand their specific needs. And we are lucky to have two distinguished gentlemen from two very important sectors here. So if I can come to you first, Pulji, and ask you, will it be a fair assumption to say that the main markets for the chemicals industry, especially in the EU, North America, and other more advanced economies, tariff barriers are not such a big problem? Would that be a first, fair assumption? You will stand to correct us. The second question would be that are there specific non-tariff measures that you face, especially in some of these key markets, and how you see solutions for them? And the last question, sir, would be that are there specific issues? We are discussing about how domestically we need to develop our competitiveness. So are there issues specific to the chemical industry that that you think should be addressed to help its competitiveness? And I mean specific by, because we know that the general issues about logistics costs or issues of labor, land, etc. we are all aware of. But I'm saying, sectorally speaking, are there specific interventions that you think will help competitiveness increase for your industry? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Now, I would also like to highlight on the previous question around IT, because I wear two hats. So I had business for biopolymers for the company, and I also drive technology and transformation for the company. So and that's of interest, considering we are talking about this $2 trillion economy and exports in next couple of years by 2030. So I think there are 2-3 points which are extremely important. One, if you were to see as a country today, what we have as a plus point is our median age is 28 years, which is 10 years younger than what China has today. Which also means that we have far more digital natives in the country who are born digital and who can easily adapt and adopt digital means to conduct business. And if I were to highlight that, if I take you back in time, 1990, China was contributing just 2% to the world GDP. Today, as we speak, they are around 20%. So they made a conscious call. They planned ahead of time. They made the right calls on creating world-scale units, plants, manufacturing facilities, services, and that's how they've now reached to where they are today. Compared to this, if you were to see US, they have just grown 2.7 times. So here, if you see China, they have done 32 times higher GDP they have gained, and US has just gained 2.7 times between 1990 to till date. So what I want to clearly highlight is that whatever numbers we are targeting, this 2 trillion, may sound little aspirational or maybe a kind of a dreamy number, but it's doable. First of all, it's doable. And technology will play a major role. And when I say that, I want to call out that there is so much happening around the globe, which as entrepreneurs, as professionals, we need to know and understand and digest. And one of the important themes is that basis a research which was done just few months back, of 900 variety of jobs, works, the different work which individuals do in their respective roles. Of that, almost 40% is going to get replaced by AI, which means that by 2035, which is just 12 to 15 years from now, most of these jobs, the repetitive works, it could be bank reconciliations, it could be around dunning, or it could be around proof of deliveries, or many others, manufacturing included, using hyper-connected systems. Much of these jobs would get replaced. Are we ready? I'm sure for most entrepreneurs sitting here, that may sound too futuristic. But the fact is, the future is already here. It's only not equitably distributed. So we are not seeing it. We are not seeing it in our part of the world, in our part of our domain. But in some parts of the world, it's already being adopted. So that, and for us to be aspiring for, say, when I say a 1 trillion economy on services, we are assuming that the world is sleeping. But we need to understand that of this 1 trillion economy, of which 50 to 60% is from software services, today you have the likes of Chat GPT, which is a conversational AI setup which has now been used extensively, which is challenging our developers who are basically 75% of the software workforce which is there globally. We capture 75% of the workforce. They are being challenged by the likes of ChatGPT because at least 7 to 8% of the development skills are being channeled through these conversational AI systems, which means that we would have less of the GDP numbers getting contributed through these conventional development channels. So the theme is that today, as a country, as a company, we all now need to take a step back and understand that our existence is at stake. We need to understand that today, whatever markets we today have is because we are offering products and services at a particular cost and with a given performance. But if we were to adopt these technologies, which will ease and basically give us productivity gains, efficiency gains, and also cost effectiveness, if we don't adopt it now, don't start investing money now, it will not happen in 7 years, 10 years time by itself. I just give you an example. China today is spending on an yearly basis almost $20 billion on AI, artificial intelligence, and basically application of artificial intelligence in their respective sectors. So they are forcing the future. I'm not saying that we are not doing anything. We may be setting up centers of excellence, but these are in very small pockets, and then much needs to be done. Coming to my company, if I were to tell you, generally what we have seen is a lot of those duty benefits which we were getting earlier are generally being phased out. But let me tell you, we export big time to US, we export big time to Europe and many other countries. So I'm not finding that these whatever issues, be it logistical issues or even duties related issues, are becoming a stumbling block. At least not for us for now. And that's because largely that what customer seeks is the product quality, the pricing and performance. So that's what they seek. And if we are comparable to other manufacturers globally, so then you are at you have an equitable footing actually. So I'll just take a pause and maybe I can respond to other pointers later as well. Yeah.
No, thanks for that. I think that was an interesting insight. I think what you mentioned about the whole automation space will have an impact across the board, including both for manufacturing and for services. And it's also heartening to note that at least for a major player like yours, for the major markets, both tariff and non-tariff barriers don't seem to be such a big stumbling block for you. If I can move to Debashish now, we saw in the presentation that the DGFT made, he had these 4 categories of goods. And in the 4th category were goods where, it's not traded that much, it's just 3% of world trade, and rice was in that list. But my question to you is that perhaps on a broad macro brush that might be true, but there are niche areas within the broader trade in rice, like the one we're discussing earlier on Basmati, for example, where there is a huge global demand, it's consumed across the world in many countries. So the specific question to you then is, one, on some of these products like Basmati rice, in which India has been well known to have competitiveness for decades now, what more can be done that we can increase its consumption, its marketability, its branding, its acceptance in markets across the world to drive, move towards rice contributing more numbers to this $1 trillion ambition? And secondly, are there other varieties of rice? Are there other products, value-added products using rice, wearing your kind of innovator, entrepreneur hat that you would think we could, take forward to the global market? And what kind of policies do you think will help you from the government side to do all of that? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Preetamji, for asking me such an important question. Now, before I begin, I would like to express my gratitude to TPCI, to my fellow co-panelists, and the respected audience for giving me this opportunity today. The question which Preetamji has asked is very close to my heart, because my group, Shri Lal Mahal Group, is in the rice business for the last 117 odd years. We have been exporting since 1978, and for the last 40 years, we have seen all the ups and downs of the market. Now, before I go into the specifics of your question, let me give you a broad overview of where we stand today. India, as an exporting nation, is exporting about $42 billion worth of agriculture and allied products alone in the fiscal year 2020-2021. Now, naturally, the target of $1 trillion of merchandise exports in 2030, we'll have to grow this from $42 billion to $126 billion by 2030. That means we need to grow 13% year on year to achieve this, which is a very, very tough target, but given the required support, we can achieve this. Now, coming to your question, I will answer your question in reverse. You asked me that what are the benefits and schemes which a player like me would like to have to grow the industry. Well, I will not answer this question specifically to my company, but to the industry at large. Now, let us first talk about the PLI scheme. The PLI scheme is a very good initiative of the government of India, whereby large players have been able to increase their global competitiveness and compete at the global stage with the so-called champions of other countries. But however, there is a small deficiency in the scheme. There are provisions for MSMEs, but because of the complexity and the inherent structure of the scheme, small players are not able to take benefit of such a scheme. When we talk about the rice industry is not concentrated by few players. About 90% of the market in the rice industry is fragmented in thousands of players, which are primarily from the MSME category. Now, if we want to take advantage of such schemes and ourselves become champions in the global market, we have to structure this scheme and adopt a cluster-based approach, whereby smaller companies can apply as a cluster and reap the benefits of the scheme. This will not only decentralize the reward system, but also ensure broader industry representation at the global stage. Now, the second most important aspect is with regard to the agriculture infrastructure. Well, the government has taken several initiatives to improve the overall infrastructure in the domestic market, where we see that a lot of investments have been made towards cold chain, a lot of investments have been made to improve the road network and the overall logistic infrastructure. The Honorable DGFT mentioned that the logistic cost our target is to decrease the logistic cost from 13% to 7%, as is there with other developed nations. But in some cases, our government has given incentives up to 80% of the investment cost. But there is one key area which is still untapped. For instance, let me give you an example. My company has a 40% market share in all rice which is imported into Madagascar. Now, when we talk about a country like Madagascar, I'm able to export as much as I want from India without any problem. But when it comes to Madagascar, there aren't enough storage facilities and importing equipment which is available at the port. And today, if the government was to incentivize me to establish these infrastructures abroad, then I will be in a position to import more. I could offer this infrastructure to my Indian counterparts. This will not only increase the global competitiveness of Indian exporters, but also ensure that India's global influence increases. So to cut it short, the most important aspect today for a basmati rice player and a rice player like me, or the industry at large, is to make investments into overseas port infrastructure, which is very much lacking today. And if this is there, because commodities is a business of logistics. So if we are able to reduce our logistic cost, not just in the domestic market, but also in the overseas market, so then we will have an edge over other countries like Pakistan, Vietnam, and Thailand. Now, coming to the third leg of the argument, is I agree that I won't go on about incentives and incentives and incentives. You asked me a question that what new products can we introduce to increase the global competitiveness and increase this market share. Now, you know, this entrepreneurial spirit is there in all Indians, which is very evident from the fact that any place you go in the world, you will find Indians over there. whether or not a flight is going there, a train is going there, but you will see an Indian who is there and in a very dominant position commanding the agri market. But where we are lacking is innovation. Most MSMEs and most players in the rice industry are geared towards providing robust supply chains, and innovation sometimes takes a backseat. What the need of the hour is for the government to introduce an innovation-centric ecosystem whereby educational institutes, research institutes, and universities can come together and offer their services to various small and large players. And these small and large players then can be educated on the process of R&D development, and they can introduce novel products in the market. Now, there are several novel products which have recently been introduced, like the black rice. Black rice is something which our Honorable Prime Minister has recently launched in Chandoli in UP. Now, ours was the first company to go and buy that rice and export it. But however, there are several challenges. Like black rice is by its inherent nature black in color. Now, our current infrastructure or our sortex machines consider black rice as a rejection rice. And they completely, flush out everything which is there. So we are not able to clean that rice. Now, the need of the hour is that we need to invest in technologies, which we have to, which can cater to these specific problems, industry-specific problems. We can go on about like Mohanbo. We were discussing a short while ago about some regional varieties. There are so many regional varieties in rice, like Mohanbo, Kala Namak rice, and if you start counting them, I think so they'll run into thousands. But these quantities are so small in number that no player wants to invest their hard-earned money into this, so that I develop the market for a few years, and after some time when the market is established, then somebody else can come and take it away. So the most important aspect for me today is that if the government, just an out-of-box thinking, the government could introduce licenses for these GI tag varieties, where they could auction it off to players like us who can participate in the bidding process and maybe take the exclusive rights to market these varieties for a particular number of years. Now, when we come to the key challenges which are faced by a rice industry player or an agro industry player, the first and foremost and the biggest threat to rice exports is today changing regulation overseas. Let us talk about Europe. In Europe, they are continuously reducing the prescribed pesticide level which they allow to import into their country. One such pesticide is tricyclazole. Now, tricyclazole, by its inherent nature, is present in nearly all food products in India, because that is how we do our agriculture. But now, the Europe has banned it, and many more countries are slowly following suit. So, like large players like us are able to invest in contract farming and in other processes where we kind of, cater to a small section of the market and are able to grow organic rice and rice which is free from these pesticides. But if we have to reach the 2030 goal, then a wider and vast, grassroots level interception by the government is required, where small players are educated about these changing regulations, and there is a strict blanket ban on all agrochemicals which are banned by the importing countries. Now, when we come to the next point, is with regard to market accessibility. Market accessibility is a very, very good, all players rice is the only commodity which is exported to more than 170 countries in the world. I can't think of any other Indian product except Indians, which is available in every country. But for a new player, it might be quite difficult to access these markets, because every market might have their own regulations, own phytosanitary requirements, and there may be language barriers. There was an official from MEA in this room earlier. My suggestion to the government would be that all our embassies overseas have a trade division. That trade division's scope has to be expanded so that this export education, this country-wise export education is given to every exporter. And perhaps everybody will be happy to even pay for it. But that is a very important requirement as of now. Now, I have addressed I've acknowledged what are the main benefits which the government is doing and the main initiatives taken by the government to increase the exports. But the most important concern which is facing a rice player today or any agro-commodity player is the sudden change in regulation. As you have seen that we have witnessed these shock and awe moments very recently when rice and wheat exports were banned overnight. Now, once these exports are banned, definitely the government has an argument that these are banned in the larger interest of the nation. But once any notification or policy change is introduced, we have to see that what is the impact of that notification on goods which might be on different stages of export. For example, some goods might be under loading, might be on way to the port. There may be some contracts for which LCs might have been issued, some contracts for which advances have been received. For example, in my case, I had a contract with the foreign government for supply of 400,000 tons of rice. Now, nobody contemplated that export duty will be imposed on rice. Now, no contract had, because this is not a force majeure event. So any country, 20% is not our margin. So we were stuck in a fix. So whenever these notifications come, we are running pillar to post, trying to find a solution, go to whoever we can to find a solution to our individual problems. What is required is that before any new regulation is introduced, the government has to comprehensively understand that what are the challenges which can be done, which the exporters can face after introduction of these regulations, and find a solution to them at the initial place itself. This will not only increase the credibility of the government, but also lead to increased investments in our sector in the longer run, which will definitely be helpful for any agro-commodity player. Now, in conclusion, if we have to increase our agri-exports threefold by 2030, we must first accept that the path won't be straightforward. It will require innovative thinking, inclusive collaboration, and unwavering dedication. By broadening market accessibility, by fostering innovation, and reforming the PLI scheme, we can all create a prosperous future for agri-exports in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Devashish. I think it was a very, very comprehensive response, and you brought a lot of points to the fore here, including issues related to some out-of-the-box solutions. So thanks for that. Now moving to you, Major Joshi Mittal. One of the concerns that has always been there is the cost of hinterland movement to port, and this is true for a lot of industries. One of the things that has often been discussed is how multimodality can be better leveraged, especially moving to rail-based movement. So I would want to know your thoughts on that, and also generally speaking, how can India, government, industry, logistics players like yours working together, bring down the overall costs of end-to-end container movement, especially to some of our non-traditional markets?
So I heard the fellow panelist also. What is understood by everyone is trade is what drives growth, and whether it's 2 trillion, 3 trillion, 5 trillion, it's for India also, I assume it's just a matter of time whether it will happen sooner or it will happen later, but it will definitely happen. And in order to fuel the international trade, I think logistics become the driving factor there. And to drive logistics, what is needed is a good infra, whether it is on road, rail, seaports, because that is the factor that decides the cost, that decides the quality, and that decides the delivery of exports or imports that are to be done. Government of India in this budget has kept a whopping 1.7% of its GDP to be invested on the logistic infra, the transportation infrastructure. So from a government perspective, whether it is a 1 lakh crore investment through Gati Shakti, whether it is bringing 16 ministries under one ULIP, whether it is creating almost 2 lakh kilometers of increased national highway network, whether it is the dedicated freight corridor to bring in speed and cost benefit for the rail movement. So the question is not whether government is doing or not. I think what we also need to see as an industry or as a service provider is how fast we can commence the delivery of operations on all the infrastructure that we are talking about. And if these are going to take time and in some cases getting delayed. The ease of doing business, the cost of doing business is also going to get delayed with those projects. I think when we invest our money, right, instead of going directly to a stock market, we prefer investing through mutual funds because we know experts will handle that. And eventually it brings in a cost benefit to you. If I think of sending something from a local shop to, say, some of my relatives, it will be expensive for me to send it through an independent service provider. Whereas if I do it through an e-com player, it will come out to be cheaper. So I think we need to be penny-wise and pound-wise as well, and look at more integrated logistics rather than standalone 5 rupee saving per kg, 2 rupee saving per kg, and not integration only at this end, as you also highlighted, on the India end. Integration of total supply chain, whether it is the India end, whether it is the overseas end. I think these are the factors that will eventually lead to a cost reduction, which was your question. It's a very heartening sign that from an infra, ease of doing business and cost perspective, India overall logistically is performing well. In LPI, the Logistics Performance Index, our percentage, our ranking from 44 has reduced to, in fact, we have done better and now we are at a rank 38 there. So I think overall, infra, fast, fast, fast is the mantra for cost reduction.
Thank you very much. I think, yes, I think a very important point about the end-to-end solution, the end-to-end supply chain management and the end-to-end infrastructure, as Devashish was mentioning that, so sometimes the bottlenecks in the costs at the destination country end, and there having a reliable logistics supply service provider to take care of some of those challenges does bring in efficiencies. Last round, because we're running short of time, what I would request all of you is to perhaps each take about 30 seconds and point out the one thing that you think is the most important, either from an industry perspective or from the government perspective, or collaboratively between industry and government, that will help achieve this very ambitious target of $2 trillion worth of exports. So maybe just starting with you, Pralok, and then down the line in the panel. Thank you.
I think the most important thing, given the 30-second time limit given to me, is that concrete planning by the industry as well as the government for non-IT services. That is the key to achieve our 1 trillion services export. Without that, I will be very doubtful to achieve that target. Thank you.
Thank you, Pralok.
I would love to hear from other panelists. Thank you.
No, I think adoption of digitization largely by the MSME sector, because that's an area which is of concern, because it's traditionally owner-driven. They think they know it all. So that has to change. And also we need to look at that whatever shift we have seen in the last 1 or 2 years, considering the geopolitical shift worldwide, that may not be there forever. That advantage may not be there forever. So we need to act fast so that the demand of the world is fulfilled by India rather than some other country. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, according to me, the single most important point for driving our export growth is innovation. Because policies, incentives, and everything can change. But innovation is something which will not only translate growth in terms of numbers, but it will be a sustainable growth with benefit to all stakeholders involved. So, as I said earlier, the most important thing today is for the government to introduce, because we have so many educational institutes, universities which are engaged into these activities. But the the right stakeholder at the ground level may not be aware of how to approach them, on how to take their benefits of their services. Like today, I might be willing to pay for a research work, but I might not know where to go. I might only know a few institutes which might be available in my vicinity, and I might not be knowing somebody might be doing a good research work on rice in Tamil Nadu. So there is a need for a common platform where all these stakeholders and players can come and offer their services to all players, and all these players can, engage into new product development and research work. That is what I feel is the most important aspect.
I think I have three aspects. One is for the industry, I think we need to innovate more. You'll be surprised or may not be to know that Nokia was a paper company which went on and became a legendary story. Similarly, Toyota was a textile manufacturing company which again became legendary. A lot of you use their vehicles, right? So I think established industries also need to look at opportunities. There is a great environment that government at the moment is providing. Second is infant industry protection. So if you see the story of South Korea and you read the stories around Hyundai, you read the stories around LG, Samsung. So what the government did from say 1975 when Hyundai came into being till 1988, government had banned import of vehicles into Korea because they were trying to protect the infant industry there. In fact, till 1998, they had banned Japanese vehicles coming into Korea. So this is the kind of, radical support sometimes the infant industry requires that can, be the game changer to be from here to, taking a huge leap there. And third is trust the experts. If you want to scale, then you need to reach out to your experts who know scaling and who know how to integrate, right? So these are the 3 points that I had.
Thank you very much to the entire panel. I think a big hand of applause to all our panelists because they have provided us not just with macro insights on a range of topics, whether it's digitalization, automation, impacts of services, on logistics, on wider issues of trade policy, but also very rich insights from specific sectors like logistics, from the agro industry, from chemicals. So really grateful. And with those words, I would like to again thank all of you and thank TPCI for bringing us all together and allowing us to have this wonderful conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you so much. Well, the powerful ending is as important as the powerful opening, and you all have just ensured that, so thank you so much once again. Please hold your horses, everyone, kindly be seated. We have felicitation ceremony now, which is the most important. We would like to acknowledge all the panelists who have taken out their precious time and contributed their invaluable support to us, along with all the moderators for conducting all the sessions with relevance and smoothly. To start with, I request Mr. Jaideep Kalra, Director, GD Foods, to please come on the stage to felicitate Mr. Om Prakash Hasaria, Senior VP, Reliance Industries. Ladies and gentlemen, it would be great if we can give a round of applause with energy and enthusiasm. This is the last round. Thank you. May I request Mr. Mahesh Kumar, DGM, Godrej Consumer Products, to kindly come on the stage to felicitate Ms. Anuradha RV, partner, Claris Law Associates. I request Mr. Om Prakash Hasaria to please come on the stage to felicitate. He is not present, so I request Mr. Vijay Gwava, Edition and Director General, to please come on the stage to felicitate all our panelists and sponsors. We would like to now appreciate all our panelists for summarizing the forum. I request Dr. Preetham Banerjee, Professor and Head, Center for WTO Studies, IIFT, and member, CATR, TPCI, to please come on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, one hand against the other, please. Sir, thank you. I request Mr. Vijay to please stay back. Sir, please stay back. We have many other panelists and we would request you only to kindly felicitate all of them. Next, I request Dr. Pralok Gupta, Associate Professor, Center for WTO Studies, IIFT, and member, CATR, TPCI, to please come on the stage. Come on, everyone, please. I request Mr. Ajay Srivastava, co-founder, Global Trade Research Initiative, to please come on the stage. Next, I request Mr. Atul Govil, Chief Transformation Officer, Business Head, Biopolymers, India Glide Courses, to please come. So, please. Next, we have Mr. Devashish Garg, Director, Sri Lal Mahal Group, to please come on the stage. Next, we have Major Jyoti Joshi Mittar, Head of Rail South Asia at AP Moeller Maersk. That's Maersk. Okay, the spellings are too complicated for me to announce. It's like M-A-E-R-S-K. Thank you, ma'am. I now request our sponsors to please come on the stage. Sir, I request you to please stay back. Sir, once again, we have now the sponsors who have supported us throughout. I request a representative from Sri Lal Mahal Group to please come on the stage. we have anyone from Sri Lal Mahal Group? This is a token of appreciation from our side, a special gratitude to all our sponsors. Can we have a next representative from Godrej Consumer Products Limited? Can we have someone from Motherson Air Travel Agencies Limited? Come on, ladies and gentlemen, can we give a big hand? Please, everyone. Your appreciation is like wind beneath our wings. Please don't stop blowing. Next, can we have someone from GD Foods Manufacturing India Private Limited? Thank you. Can we have someone from Everest Food Products Private Limited to please come on the stage? So, on behalf of Everest Food Products, TPCI is collecting their memento. Thank you. And now, next we have a knowledge partner, EY. Can we have someone from EY, please? Come on, everyone, put your hands together. This is the last round of applause. And after this, we have a group photograph. So please don't go anywhere. All right. Thank you so much. I'm sure people are hungry here, so we have arranged a slap of meal for all of you. Please proceed for the same. And I would like to thank all of you for participating. I hope it was worth your time. And thank as a word is so small, yet it speaks the volume of the hidden sentiments and gratitude within the heart. So thank you so much once again for your time. I hope it was a learning experience for all of you. And please now proceed for your lunch. This is your host, Kamal Homi Mistry, signing off.